The morning her parents sold Grandpa's land, Mara was on her knees in front of his refrigerator, scrubbing away the blood pressure numbers he had written on the door with a black marker dot 142/88, 137/82, 151/90, followed by a frowning face. Colleen came into the kitchen carrying 3 plastic cups of iced tea and a blue folder pressed to her chest. "Well," she said, "it's done." Mara kept rubbing. The ink had soaked into the refrigerator's pebbled surface. "What's done?" "The closing. 10:17 this morning." Her mother set one of the teas beside the sink. "We are officially no longer responsible for 173 acres of collapsing structures and weaponized weeds." Dean entered behind her, jingling the keys to his truck. 30 days, he said. "Nolan gave us 30 days to clear the house." Mara sat back on her heels. "You sold it today?" "We've been telling you this was happening. You told me you were considering an offer." The blue folder slid from beneath Colleen's arm. Mara caught a glimpse of signatures, a legal description, and one line in the block letters. "Subject to existing quarry lease." Dean's phone rang. He looked at the screen, then at Mara, before answering. "Nolan," he said. "Yeah, we're still here." He listened, his eyes drifting toward the hallway that led to Grandpa's locked office. "No," Dean said. "She hasn't made a decision about the company." Mara slowly stood. "What decision?" Neither of her parents answered her. 19 days earlier, Dean Hollis had stood beside his father's casket and told a room full of people that Silas Hollis never wasted anything. It was a good line. Mara knew, because everyone nodded. They nodded in their dark coats beneath the rattling ceiling fans of the Mount Olive Fellowship Hall, where the funeral home had moved the reception after the church basement developed a plumbing problem. They nodded over ham biscuits and macaroni salad. They nodded because Silas had saved bent nails in coffee cans, fence wire in the rafters, and every receipt he had received since 1976. He could find a use for anything, Dean continued. A broken hinge, a worn-out tire, a piece of stone everybody else would have thrown aside. Mara stood near the back with a stack of paper plates against her stomach. Her father had not visited during the final 4 days of Silas's life because he and Grandpa had argued about whether the hospital bed should face the window. Dean had wanted it turned toward the television. Silas, unable to speak clearly by then, had lifted one shaking hand and pointed toward the sycamore outside. Dean had left saying, "Fine, he always gets what he wants." Now he spoke with a catch in his voice so convincing that Mara felt mean for remembering. Colleen appeared beside her and removed the plates from Mara's hands. "Stop working. I'm holding plates. You've been holding something all day. Flowers, coats, that woman from the pharmacy when she started crying. Mrs. Hendricks. I know who she is. You called her Mrs. Henderson. She corrected me." Colleen tucked the plates under her own arm. "Go eat." Mara looked toward the food table. 6 foil pans of baked pasta steamed beneath lids. Someone had brought a bowl of grapes, perhaps as an accusation. "I'm not hungry. You're never hungry until you're shaking and unpleasant. I'm already unpleasant." "Yes, but your hands are steady." Colleen's mouth twitched. It was nearly a smile, and that made Mara want to lean against her. Then her mother glanced at Mara's black dress, a plain one bought for a restaurant interview 2 years earlier, and straightened the collar, as if tidying merchandise. "You could have worn the navy. It doesn't fit." "It fit at Christmas. Grandpa died on Monday. I didn't schedule a fitting." Colleen's fingers stopped. For a moment, something honest passed between them. Fatigue, grief, the knowledge that both of them had been awake at odd hours for different reasons. Then a man from Silas's church approached to tell Colleen what a blessing Mara had been during the illness. Colleen brightened with practiced sorrow. She certainly was. A real sacrifice, putting her life on hold. Mara waited. Her mother squeezed her arm. Well, she had the flexibility. There it was. The man wandered off with a ham biscuit, unaware that he had stepped between them and set off a device. Mara took back the plates. "I should put these out. I didn't mean it the way you're determined to hear it." "How did you mean it?" "You were available. That's not an insult." It was, in the Hollis family, nearly a biography. At 26, Mara had worked at a hotel laundry, a garden center, a print shop, and for 8 uncomfortable months at a dental office where the dentist insisted everyone call him Captain. She had completed 3 semesters of community college, stopped when rent went up, returned 2 years later, and stopped again when Silas had his stroke. None of her jobs impressed Dean, who had managed the same auto parts store for 22 years, and spoke of employer health insurance with religious gratitude. Colleen kept a folded brochure for the county nursing program in her purse in case Mara unexpectedly became another person. Silas had never called her aimless. He called her Squirrel because she moved objects from one place to another and then forgot where she had put them. It was not necessarily better. After the last funeral guests left, Mara returned to the farmhouse with her parents. The kitchen smelled of the beef stew she had forgotten to throw away, and Silas's ceramic mug sat upside down on a dish towel beside the sink. She had washed it the morning he died. Dean walked through the rooms, opening curtains. "What are you doing?" Mara asked, looking. "You can look with the curtains closed, then I'd be feeling." He said it lightly, but he did not turn around. Colleen began gathering prescription bottles from the kitchen counter. She dropped them into a grocery bag one at a time, reading each label before letting go. Mara took the bag from her. The hospice nurse said, "I can bring those to the pharmacy. I was handling it. I know where they go." "Of course you do." Dean came back carrying a cardboard box full of old magazines. "We should order a dumpster." Mara stared at him. "Not today," he added. "Bold compromise," Colleen said. "What? We need one eventually? Unless National Geographic has started buying back 1998. Silas had been dead for 5 days, and already the house had turned into labor. Chairs became items, rooms became square footage. The narrow walnut table where he cleaned his pocket knife every Sunday became something Dean measured with his hands before whispering, "Could be worth a little." Mara went down the hall and closed the door to Silas's office. It had always been the one room she entered only after knocking. Even after his stroke, when he could no longer manage the 2 steps down from the hallway, he asked her whether she had moved anything in there. She usually had. Tax notices had to be opened, dust had to be disturbed. Once, while looking for his insurance card, she had discovered 18 identical pens lined up in the top drawer, and laughed so hard that he refused to speak to her for an afternoon. Now, the office door was locked. Silas had kept the key on a ring clipped inside his left suspender strap. Mara had removed those suspenders the night the hospice aide helped wash him. She could remember setting them on the dresser. She could not remember seeing a key. She pressed her forehead against the door. From the kitchen, Dean called, "Mara, did Dad still have that old Winchester?" Top shelf of his bedroom closet. A pause followed. "Loaded?" "Yes." Another pause. "You knew that?" "I lived here." The words came out sharper than she intended. Dean appeared at the end of the hall, his suit jacket folded over one arm. "You stayed here," he said. "There's a difference." She lifted her head. "What's the difference?" "A life has a direction." "Toward an auto parts store?" He looked as if she had slapped him with something small but surprisingly dense. She regretted it at once. Dean's job had fed her, insured her, and paid for the braces she had hated. He had worked Saturdays for most of her childhood. He also had a way of turning every kindness into a receipt he could produce during an argument. "I didn't mean that," she said. "Sure, I'm tired. So is everybody." Dean started back toward the kitchen, then stopped. "The lawyer wants to meet Monday," he said. 11 o'clock. "For the will?" "No, Mara, for his sourdough recipe." She almost laughed. Dean almost did too. It was the sort of exchange that could have rescued them once. Then he said, "Whatever happens Monday, don't build it up into something it isn't." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means Dad was practical. Grandpa kept 600 pounds of quarry samples in the barn. He had his own definition." On Monday morning, the lawyer arrived carrying a brown case that looked older than Mara. Ellen Rusk had handled Silas's property filings for years. She was a narrow woman in a green raincoat with silver hair cut bluntly at her jaw, and the distracted courtesy of someone who was always trying to remember where she had parked. They sat around the walnut table. Dean and Colleen took one side. Mara sat opposite them in Silas's chair without thinking, then nearly moved when she realized. She stayed. Ellen removed several documents and a pair of drugstore reading glasses. "I know people expect these meetings to resemble television," she said. "I'm sorry to tell you there will be no gasps required by law." Dean folded his hands. Dad didn't have much use for drama. All 3 women looked at him. "What?" he said. Ellen began with bank accounts, personal effects, and funeral expenses. Silas had left modest cash gifts to his church and to Leon Pike, a name Mara knew from quarry stories, but had not heard Silas say in years. The remaining cash would settle medical balances and taxes. Then came the land. The farmhouse, barns, timber acreage, hay fields, and quarry property passed jointly to Dean and Colleen. Mara watched her mother's shoulders release by half an inch. Dean merely nodded, but his thumb rubbed the edge of the table. Silas left Mara his 1989 Ford pickup. Dean looked at her. "The green one?" "There is only one," Mara said. "That thing doesn't have a floor on the passenger side. It has most of one." Ellen continued. Mara also received the contents of Silas's quarry office and his full ownership interest in Hollis Cutstone, LLC. Silence settled over the table. Dean blinked. "That company still exists?" "Legally, yes. It hasn't operated since, 2012? "Not at scale," Ellen said. Colleen turned to Mara with an expression too close to pity. "Well, your grandfather knew you liked old things." Mara looked at the papers in front of Ellen. "What does the company own? Its records will provide a fuller inventory." "That means nothing," Dean said. "Some rusted equipment, maybe. Bills." Ellen's eyes moved to him. "It means the company." Dean leaned back. The chair creaked beneath him. "I'm not criticizing," he said. "I just don't want Mara thinking she inherited a gold mine." "It was limestone," Mara said. "You know what I mean." She did. He meant she should not confuse being remembered with being trusted. The land had gone to capable people. She had received a truck with a missing floor, a locked room, and the legal remains of something that had stopped working when she was 12. Ellen reached into her case and placed a small manila envelope in front of Mara. Her name was written across it in Silas's blocky handwriting. Inside was a brass key and a business card stained with a pale blue thumbprint. "Hollis Cut Stone," the card read. Beneath the company name, Silas had written 4 words. "Start with what remains." Mara turned the card over. Nothing. Not a bank account number, not an explanation, not even one of Silas's dry little arrows indicating where she ought to look next. Dean held out his hand. "Let me see." She gave him the business card, but kept the key. He read the message and snorted softly. "Sounds like him." "What does?" Giving an instruction instead of saying goodbye. Colleen leaned across to look. "Maybe he wrote it before he got sick." "He used a pen after the stroke," Mara said. "Barely. He practiced." She remembered holding a legal pad against Silas's knees while he worked his fingers around a marker. He had drawn the same crooked S 23 times, becoming angrier as the letters improved too slowly. When Mara suggested a break, he wrote "no" so forcefully the marker tore the paper. Ellen Rusk removed her glasses. "Mara, I recommend that you have the company records reviewed before making any decisions. Ownership of a limited liability company can include obligations as well as assets." Dean handed back the card. "There. Obligations," Ellen said, as well as. "Do you have money for an accountant?" "No." "Then that's relevant." Colleen touched his wrist. "Not now." "When?" "She's sitting in Dad's chair looking like he left her Standard Oil." "I'm sitting," Mara said. "That's the whole activity." Dean pushed back from the table and went to the sink. He ran water into a glass, drank half, and poured the rest out. Silas had hated that. Every time Dean did it, Silas would say, "Water doesn't become poison because it sat for 10 seconds." Mara waited to hear the complaint, even though its owner had been buried that morning. Ellen slid a thin packet toward her. "These are the documents I currently have concerning the transfer. The company's complete records should be in the quarry office." "Should be?" Mara asked. "Your grandfather was an excellent record keeper. Then why shouldn't they be there?" "Because he was also an excellent mover of records. He once brought me a deed in a tackle box. He said it was waterproof. It smelled like trout." Dean turned from the sink. "Do we need to do anything about this company before we can sell the land?" The question changed the room. Mara looked at him. "You're selling? We're considering our options. You asked about a dumpster before the funeral flowers wilted. Because the barn roof is open to the sky. One corner is. Rain doesn't care about percentages." Ellen put her glasses into their case with a small click. "The company and the real estate are separate estate gifts. You should each review your own position before entering any agreement." Dean's forehead tightened. What position? Your legal position. That sounded like a warning. It sounded like a lawyer, Colleen said. Ellen gave her a grateful look. I'll send you all copies of the relevant filings. Until then, don't sign anything you don't understand. Dean laughed once. That is a warning. After Ellen left, Colleen opened the refrigerator and began disposing of food. She worked briskly, making decisions without tasting or smelling anything. Stew, gone. Half a lemon, gone. A container of cooked green beans, gone. Mara took the green beans out of the trash. They're fine. They're gray. They were gray when I cooked them. That isn't a defense. Dean stood at the front window, watching Ellen reverse 3 times before finding the driveway. Property tax is due in 6 weeks. You just inherited the land this morning, Mara said. And the county was somehow prepared for that. We can help with the tax, Colleen said. We just don't intend to pour money into a place no one is using. I'm using it. Both parents turned. Mara felt heat creep up her neck. The room she slept in still held her suitcase on the floor because Silas had never cleared the dresser. Her shampoo was in the bathroom. Her coffee was in the cabinet. Still, using sounded temporary. People used waiting rooms. For now, Colleen said gently. Your apartment lease ended, Dean said. You came here to help Dad. You did help him. But you knew this wasn't permanent. No one told me you'd sell the house. No one knew what Dad's will said. You seem to have recovered from the surprise. Dean rubbed his mouth. His cheeks were rough with the gray stubble he had missed shaving. Mara, your mother and I cannot live here. We don't want to rent it. The well pump is going, the septic system is older than you, and the back field hasn't been cut since June. August, Mara said. That's worse. Colleen closed the refrigerator. We'll make sure you have time to figure something out. The phrase made Mara feel as if she had been handed a brochure at a shelter. She folded the business card around the brass key and put both into her coat pocket. I'm going to the quarry. Dean glanced toward the darkening windows. It'll be muddy. Limestone probably hates that. You know what I mean. She did, and resented him for it. The green Ford sat beneath the equipment shed, its hood filmed with dust and yellow pollen. One tire looked low. A rust hole near the bottom of the passenger door had spread into a shape resembling Florida. Mara opened the driver's side and slid onto the cracked vinyl seat. The cab smelled of oil, wet rope, and the peppermint candies Silas had kept in the ashtray. She put the key from the visor into the ignition. The engine clicked. She tried again. Click. Dean appeared beside the open door carrying a charger. I thought you were going inside, Mara said. I thought you were going to the quarry. I am. Not in this. It's mine. So is the dead battery. He lifted the hood, connected the charger, and said nothing for several minutes. Mara stayed behind the wheel, hands resting at 10 and 2 like a nervous student. Colleen watched from the kitchen window before disappearing. Dean leaned over the engine. He ever let you drive it? Once. When? After his stroke. We went to the pharmacy. That doesn't count. The police would disagree. He wouldn't let me touch this truck until I was 23. Maybe he learned. Dean looked up. Dad? The disbelief in his voice was almost funny. The engine started on the 4th attempt. Coughing blew smoke into the shed. Dean stepped back and waved a hand in front of his face. Try not to die of carbon monoxide before you inspect your empire. I'll put it on my list. He lowered the hood, but kept one hand on it. The lower road washes out, he said. Take the ridge road and go slow after the cattle guard. You coming? His hand fell away. No. The quarry lay beyond the north hayfield, hidden from the farmhouse by a wooded rise. Mara passed the barn, the rusted spreader, and a line of fence posts Silas had intended to replace every spring for at least 9 years. The truck jolted across the cattle guard hard enough to bounce a peppermint from the ashtray. At the top of the ridge, the trees opened. The quarry did not resemble a hole so much as a missing section of the earth. Pale stone terraces descended through sumac and cedar toward a wide pool the color of an old nickel. Rainwater had covered the lowest working bench years ago. The surface reflected the clouds without movement. Beyond it stood the cutting shed, a long corrugated metal building with one sagging gutter. A gantry crane straddled the yard. Rust streaked its legs, but the steel cable still hung over a row of rectangular limestone blocks. They waited in the weeds with the patience of furniture in an abandoned house. Mara parked beside the smaller office building. Silas had brought her here on Saturdays when she was in college and wanted laundry money. She had swept dust, labeled samples, and answered the phone when it rang, which it rarely did. He paid her in cash and deducted 50 cents every time she arrived late. Once, after she protested that family ought to get some flexibility, he had said, "Family gets supper. Work gets done." She tried the brass key in the office lock. It did not turn. "Of course," she muttered. The second lock, on the cutting shed, did not fit either. She walked around the office, checking the storage closet and the steel cabinet near the power pole. By then, mist had begun to collect on her hair. The key fit a small brass padlock beneath the office steps. A narrow compartment opened behind a hinged board. Inside was another ring of keys, each labeled with metal tags. Office, shed, fuel, file 2. Silas had hidden the useful keys under the building and then left her the key to the hiding place. Mara stared at the ring. "You exhausting old man." The office key worked. Stale cold air met her at the door. The room smelled of paper, machine grease, and damp stone. A calendar from 14 years earlier hung above the desk, still turned to September. 2 hard hats rested on hooks. One had Silas written across the front. The other said, "Dean." Mara stopped just inside. Her father's hard hat was blue, scratched white along the crown. She had never seen it. Dean had spoken of the quarry as if it were a summer job he had escaped, not a place where his name had once been permanent enough for paint. She left both hats where they were. The desk drawers contained pencils, invoices, a dead flashlight, and enough rubber bands to restrain a goat. The filing cabinets were arranged by year. Silas's system revealed itself slowly. Payroll in the tan cabinet, equipment in green, customers in black, property documents in the red fireproof cabinet near the window. The key tagged File 2 opened it. On top lay the company's annual registrations, each stamped and paid. Mara checked the dates twice. The most recent filing was only 4 months old. Beneath those were insurance summaries, equipment titles, inspection reports, and a handwritten inventory. Several items had been crossed out, but the stone saw, derrick, pumps, blocks, and workshop tools remained listed, not valuable necessarily. Remaining. Her phone vibrated. Colleen had sent a message. "Dinner at 6. Your father made calls. A buyer is looking tomorrow." Mara read it again. They had been heirs for less than 7 hours. She set the phone face down and lifted the next folder. On its cover, Silas had written, "Lease, original," in the same block letters he used on freezer labels. Mara opened it expecting an equipment rental. The first page named Silas Hollis as landlord and Hollis Cutstone, LLC, as tenant. It described 41 acres, the quarry, cutting shed, office, stockpiled material, water system, and right of access from the county road. The original term was 35 years. Mara checked the date, then counted forward. Her fingertips left damp marks on the paper. The lease had 17 years left. 17 years did not look like anything on paper. It was one typed sentence beneath 11 pages of definitions, restrictions, maintenance schedules, and language designed to make ordinary verbs suspicious. Mara read it 3 times, then found a yellow legal pad in the desk and wrote, "Land equals mom and dad, company equals me." She stared at the last line. That can't be right. Silas had been both the owner of the land and the sole owner of the company when the agreement was signed. The signature page showed his name twice, once above landlord and once above managing member, Hollis Cut, Stone, LLC. Ellen Rusk had notarized it. Mara pictured Silas moving from one side of a table to the other, between signatures, arguing with himself over the terms. The lease included exclusive use of the quarry tract, the office, the cutting shed, the stockyard, and the water system. The company could use the ridge road and an older gravel route running north to the county highway. It owned stone already removed from the quarry face, along with any equipment listed on an attached schedule. The rent was $1,200 a year. Mara found payment records in the next folder. Every January, Hollis Cutstone had issued a check to Silas Hollis. Every January, Silas had deposited it into his farm account. Every check cleared, including the one from 8 months ago. He had paid himself rent from a company that had no visible income. She searched until she found the company bank statements. The balance was just under $2,000. No miracle hid between the columns. Silas had funded the account with small transfers and used it for insurance, filings, and lease payments. The final statement showed the money bleeding away. Mara returned to the agreement. The company was responsible for drainage, fencing, workplace safety, insurance, and preventing sediment from leaving the leased tract. That explained the handwritten inspection sheets she had seen. It did not explain how a man who needed help buttoning his shirt had supposedly inspected a quarry pump in April. A later amendment had been clipped to the back. The legal language gave way to one clear date. Because commercial cutting had been suspended, the tenant had until December 31st of the current year to resume bona fide stone production. If it failed, the landowner could issue a notice of termination. Bona fide, Mara said aloud. Very helpful. The office offered no answer. Rain ticked against the metal awning. Somewhere inside the cutting shed, a loose panel knocked at an irregular rhythm. She photographed every page with her phone, then returned the lease to the red cabinet. After a moment, she removed it again and carried it to the desk. Leaving the original in a building her parents intended to sell felt foolish. Taking it from a filing cabinet that no longer belonged to the company might also be foolish. She settled on slipping it inside her coat, as if warmth made the decision legal. Outside, the quarry pool had darkened to charcoal. Mara locked the office, replaced the keyring in the compartment beneath the steps, and drove back to the house with the original lease on the passenger seat. Halfway up the ridge, the truck's engine coughed. "No," she said. The Ford coughed again, lurched, and died beside the cattle guard. She turned the key. The engine produced a weary grinding sound. Mara rested her forehead against the steering wheel. The horn gave a short, indignant blast. It seemed fair. Dean arrived 20 minutes later in his truck, stopped nose to nose with the Ford, and got out carrying jumper cables. "You leave headlights on?" "No. Radio? It doesn't have one." "Anything plugged into the lighter?" "There are peppermints in the ashtray. Could they be draining it?" He looked at her over the hood. Sarcasm is often a sign of low blood sugar. "Did Mom send you?" "She mentioned you didn't eat." "I had a ham biscuit." "At the funeral? It's been a full nutritional day." He attached the cables, then noticed the folder on the passenger seat. "What's that?" "The company lease." Dean's hand stopped on the clamp. "It was in the office. I gathered that. You knew about it?" "I knew Dad had created some kind of paper arrangement when he formed the LLC. He owned both sides. It was tax stuff. It's not tax stuff now." He closed the hood more carefully than necessary. "What does that mean?" "Hollis Cut Stone leases the quarry for another 17 years. Dean stared at her. Rain dotted his glasses. "What part?" "All of it." "That isn't an answer. The quarry tract, 41 acres. The office, shed, road access, equipment, stockpiled stone. Let me see. Not in the rain." "I'm not going to eat it, Mara. Let's go to the house." His expression changed when she said house. Not Grandpa's house. Not home. Just a structure available to both of them for the present. He started the Ford with the cables attached. The engine caught, rattling hard. "You'll need a battery," he said. "I'll add it to my thriving corporation's expenses." "Don't joke about that." "You did." "Yes, and now I'm telling you not to." He followed her back without explaining why. Colleen had set the dining table with bowls instead of the everyday plates. She had reheated stew from the freezer, not the container she had thrown away. 3 wedges of cornbread sat on a saucer in the middle. "You're wet," she told Mara. "I was outside." That generally explains it. Mara placed the lease beside her bowl. Dean took off his glasses and wiped them on his shirt. "She says Dad leased the quarry to the company." Colleen ladled stew. "He was the company." "Was," Mara said. Her mother lowered the ladle. "All right, what exactly are we discussing?" Mara opened the lease to the description of the premises. The pages were faintly warm from being inside her coat. She explained what she had found, trying to keep her voice even. When she reached the remaining term, Colleen sat down without filling her own bowl. 17 years, she said. "That's what it says." "Can he do that?" "He did. I mean, can he give us land and then give you the right to use part of it?" "It isn't something he did in the will. The lease was signed years ago." Dean pushed his untouched bowl away. "But he kept it alive." "Yes." "Why?" Mara looked at the handwritten message on the business card, now tucked inside her wallet. I don't know. Dean gave a humorless laugh. I do. He knew exactly how this would land. Maybe it wasn't about you. It has my land tied to a company you now own. How would that not be about me? Our land, Colleen said. He glanced at her. That's what I meant. No, it isn't, but continue. Mara turned to the amendment. The company has to resume production by the end of the year. Dean's eyes sharpened. Or, the landowner can terminate. Good. The word came too quickly. Mara closed the folder. I didn't say I wanted it terminated. You don't know what you want. I found it 3 hours ago. And tomorrow a buyer is walking the property. Then tell him there's a lease. Obviously. Colleen finally filled her bowl, though she took only broth. Does it prevent us from selling? Mara hesitated. It doesn't seem to. Then we can all breathe. It means whoever buys the land buys it with the lease in place. If they agree, Dean said, or you can dissolve the company. Why would I do that? Because it has no customers, no workers, no working equipment, and $2,000 you said is disappearing. Mara had not told him the balance. You read the statements? No. You talk to yourself when you're worried. I heard you in the office before I came down. She thought of him standing outside the quarry building in the rain while she muttered over the records. He had come farther than the truck. Dean picked up his spoon and set it down again. Dad left you a burden dressed as an opportunity, he said. That was one of his favorite tricks. He'd hand you a broken machine and act insulted when you didn't thank him. You still have the hard hat. His face emptied. In the office, Mara said. Blue. Your name's on it? Colleen looked from one of them to the other. Dean stood and carried his full bowl to the sink. He kept everything, he said. He went outside without a coat. The buyer arrived at 9 the next morning in a clean gray sport utility vehicle that seemed poorly suited to mud and completely confident about it. Nolan Voss was younger than Mara expected, perhaps 40, with a trim beard and a canvas jacket that had been expensive before someone made it look rugged. He shook Colleen's hand with both of his and praised the sycamore before he mentioned the house. Dean remained formal. Mara recognized his customer service voice from childhood visits to the auto parts store. We haven't discussed a listing, he said. I prefer properties before they become listings, Nolan replied. Fewer expectations attached. His gaze reached Mara. And you're the granddaughter? Mara. Nolan, I guessed. He smiled as if she had passed a small test. They toured the farmhouse first. Nolan checked the electrical panel, looked beneath the kitchen sink, and asked about the well without making a face at any answer. Colleen began pointing out cracks before he found them, compelled by a morality no buyer required. At the barn, Nolan stood beneath the missing roof panels and studied the timber frame. Good bones, he said. Dean snorted. That's what people say before an expensive surgery. Nolan laughed. It loosened something between them. They took 2 vehicles to the ridge because Mara refused to ride with him. She drove the green Ford with Colleen beside her. Dean rode in Nolan's SUV, which bothered Mara more than it should have. At the quarry overlook, Nolan did not react like a man seeing the place for the first time. His eyes traveled directly to the cutting shed, then followed the ridge road toward the north boundary. You've been here before, Mara said. I've viewed aerials. Aerials show the padlock under the office steps. Colleen turned toward her. Mara. Nolan slid his hands into his jacket pockets. I walked the perimeter last week with your grandfather's surveyor. I didn't enter any buildings. He looked toward the pool. Quarry creates a challenge, he said, but challenges can be priced. For country estates? Mara asked. Dean glanced at her. How did you know? Nolan has clean boots and an SUV that seats 7. He's not here to grow soybeans. Nolan smiled again, but this one contained less amusement. 5 large parcels, he said. Possibly 6. Preserve the woods, improve the road, restore the farmhouse. And the quarry? I'd secure it. With what? Fencing, initially. Hollis cut stone has access rights. The wind moved through the cedars. Colleen's hand closed around the collar of her coat. Dean said, Mara found the lease. Nolan's gaze stayed on her. He showed no surprise. Yes, he said. I assumed she would. That was worse than surprise. You knew Grandpa left me the company? Ellen recorded the estate notice. I ordered the corporate filings. You've done a lot for a man who hasn't made an offer. I don't like surprises. Mara folded her arms. Neither do I. Then we may be useful to each other. He explained that his purchase could proceed subject to the lease, though it would affect his price. He had no interest in operating a quarry and suspected Mara had no interest in becoming responsible for one. If she wanted, he would make a separate offer for the company's leasehold rights and remaining assets. How much? Colleen asked. Dean looked at her. What? We're standing in mud. We might as well use numbers. 10,000, Nolan said. Mara looked down at the flooded benches, the silent crane, and the pale blocks disappearing into weeds. $10,000 was more than she had ever possessed at once. Nolan took a card from his pocket. There's no pressure from me, he said. Only a deadline in the lease. His expression shifted by a fraction. So, you read the amendment? Mara accepted his card without promising anything. When they returned to the farmhouse, she went directly to the hallway telephone. Silas's old contact sheet was taped inside the cabinet above it. Leon Pike's number had been crossed out once, rewritten, and circled. A man answered on the fifth ring. What? Is this Leon? Depends who's asking. My name is Mara Hollis. The silence that followed had weight. Silas's granddaughter, she added. I know who you are. I inherited Hollis Cutstone. That sounds like something Silas would do to a person. She gripped the receiver. I need to know what's left at the quarry. Water, rust, and bad judgment. Nolan Voss offered me $10,000 for the company. Leon breathed into the phone. Then his voice changed. Don't sign anything, he said. And whatever you do, don't touch that lower pump. Why? Because the shaft seal was failing when I left, and Silas never replaced anything until it embarrassed him in public. It hasn't run in 14 years. That would be another reason. Mara pulled Nolan's business card toward her and turned it face down on the telephone shelf. Which one is the lower pump? The one at the lower bench. Helpful. You know what a bench is? Yes. Then we're making progress. She could hear metal clanging behind him and the rising whine of an impact wrench. Can you come look at the quarry? No. You answered that before I finished. I knew where you were headed. I'll pay you. With what? She glanced toward the dining room where Colleen was speaking quietly to Dean. The company has some money, then protect it from yourself. Mr. Pike, Leon was good enough when you wanted something. Leon. I don't know what I inherited. You inherited your grandfather's refusal to throw anything away. That's what everybody said at his funeral. I wasn't there. Mara had noticed. The fellowship hall had been full of men who told stories about buying fence posts from Silas, borrowing his trailer, or losing to him at cards. No one had mentioned the man who spent nearly 3 decades beside him in the quarry. Why not? The impact wrench stopped. Leon's answer came into the quieter space. Because he was dead. The line disconnected. Mara held the receiver to her ear until the dial tone began. Colleen appeared in the doorway. Charming? He has range. Is he going to help? No. Then you've made a phone call and can now eat lunch without feeling you've surrendered your future. I ate breakfast. You drank coffee while Nolan inspected the foundation. There may have been sugar in it. Colleen crossed the hall, took Mara by both shoulders, and turned her toward the kitchen. I am not watching you become one of those women who lives on caffeine and righteous indignation. Grandpa lived on both, and look how relaxed he was. Dean sat at the table with a calculator, a property tax statement, and a yellow notebook. Nolan's card lay beside his elbow. He's making an offer by Friday, Dean said. On the land? No, on your charming personality. Yes, the land. Mara opened the refrigerator and stared inside. You met him yesterday. He came prepared. He knew more about the lease than you did. That wouldn't be difficult, apparently. Colleen put bread, cheese, and mustard on the counter. We are not fighting over who failed to read which document. We didn't know it existed, Dean said. You knew there was a lease, Mara replied. I knew Dad liked moving money from one pocket to another so the government couldn't reach it. That is not how taxes work, Colleen said. I sell brake rotors. You say that like it has prevented you from discussing taxes for 30 years. Mara made a sandwich and left before either parent could turn the argument back toward her. At the quarry, the old office had warmed enough to release a deeper smell of damp paper. She carried the company documents inside, set the lease on the desk, and began an inventory. The cutting shed key resisted until she leaned her weight against the sliding door. Rust cracked loose along the track. The opening widened 6 inches, then a foot, releasing a cold mineral breath. Mara squeezed inside. High windows striped the dust with white light. The stone saw occupied the center of the building, its circular blade taller than Mara and browned with surface rust. Hoses lay stiff across the floor. Toolboards covered one wall, their painted outlines showing where wrenches and hammers had once hung. Some tools remained, others had vanished. The gantry controls were wrapped in a cloudy plastic bag. A paper tag tied to the lever read, "Do not energize." Silas's handwriting. Finally, Mara said, "Specific advice." She photographed serial numbers and compared them with the inventory. The saw was present. The old forklift was not. A smaller wire saw stood beneath a tarp. 2 pumps were listed, one portable and one marked lower dewatering, repair before use. Leon had not been exaggerating. In a storage cage, she found boxes of stone samples labeled with building names and dates. Courthouse East Steps, St. Matthew's Bell Tower, Union Depot, Smoky Band. Each held pieces of blue-gray limestone, some polished and some rough, the edges wrapped in yellowing newspaper. She lifted the depot sample into the light. Thin, dark lines moved across its face like smoke underwater. Silas had taught her to wet stone before judging the color. Mara carried the sample outside, poured water from a bottle over it, and watched the gray deepen toward blue. For several seconds, it was beautiful enough to make $10,000 seem insulting. Then she looked past it at the flooded quarry, the dead equipment, and the cedar growing from the cutting shed gutter. Beauty had never paid her rent. The lower bench lay beyond a weed-choked service road. Mara followed it downhill with the pump inspection sheet in hand. At the final turn, water covered the road. A narrow metal platform extended from the stone wall above it, holding an electric motor beneath a bent hood. The lower pump. A conduit ran from the motor to a control box, farther upslope. A red tag hung from the box, its writing bleached unreadable. Mara did not touch it. She opened the inspection panel instead. A family of mice had stored acorns behind the switch assembly. She took a picture and shut the door. At the office, she searched for recent inspection records. The last professional service invoice was 11 years old. Silas had continued filling out quarterly sheets in blue ink, checking boxes for fencing, runoff, vegetation, and pump condition. 4 months ago, beside lower pump, he had marked monitored. Not tested, not operating, monitored. Mara thought of him sitting in the hospital bed, unable to lift his right arm. Somebody had been coming to the quarry for him, or Silas had treated paperwork as an argument reality would be too polite to challenge. She found the main electrical panel behind the cutting shed. One breaker was labeled office. Another said well. 3 were illegible. The largest had lower pump written beside it in faded marker. It was switched off. Mara stood with one hand on the panel door. She knew Leon had told her not to touch the lower pump. She also knew the lease required the water system to be maintained. The lower bench was flooded, and no one had given her an answer that did not sound like a test designed to see whether she would obey. She told herself she would switch it on for 1 second. The breaker resisted, then snapped upward. A deep humming rolled beneath the quarry. For half a breath, Mara felt triumphant. The hum became a grinding shriek. A flash burst from the motor platform below. The breaker kicked back with a violent crack, and a plume of gray smoke rose beneath the bent hood. Mara slapped the panel door closed. Oh, excellent. The smoke thinned almost immediately. No fire followed, only silence and the faint smell of burnt wiring drifting uphill. Her phone showed 1 bar of service. She called Leon. He answered on the 3rd ring. "What did you do? How do you know I did something?" "You're calling back. The lower pump may have made a noise." "What kind?" "Mechanical. All pump noises are mechanical. This one ended electrically." There was a pause. "You turned it on?" "For less than 2 seconds." "Did the breaker trip?" "Yes." "Is the motor burning?" "Not anymore." "Not anymore?" There was smoke. Past tense. Leon made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had contained any happiness. "I told you not to touch it. You also refused to come out. Those were separate instructions." "How bad is it?" "Was the motor seized before you energized it?" "I don't know." "Then somewhere between bad and expensive." He hung up again. Mara sat on the office steps with her sandwich, which had become warm and flattened inside its plastic bag. She ate half before remembering the mice. By late afternoon, she had found the pump's maintenance history. The shaft seal had failed 17 years earlier. been repaired twice, and started leaking again before operations stopped. A replacement estimate was clipped to the final report. Silas had written "too high" across it. Behind the maintenance folder sat a steel toolbox with L. Pike painted on the lid. It was heavy enough that Mara had to carry it in both arms. Inside, each socket rested in a fitted wooden slot. The wrenches were clean. A machinist's square had been wrapped in oiled cloth. The only neglected thing was a pair of cracked leather gloves folded beneath the tray. One glove had the last two fingers sewn shut. Mara lowered it back into the box. Silas had kept paying it. The address on the policy matched a small house on the west side of town, but Mara drove first to the municipal garage, guided by the impact wrench she had heard over the phone. Leon stood beneath a raised salt spreader truck, welding a bracket. He wore a dark work shirt with Pike stitched over the pocket and a leather guard over his left forearm. His hair was iron gray, cropped close. 2 fingers on his left hand ended at the middle knuckle. Mara waited until he lifted his welding mask. "You have a listening problem," he said. "I brought your toolbox." His eyes dropped to it. Where was that? Cutting shed. Silas said it disappeared. He put it in the storage cage. Leon switched off the welder. "That's where I kept it." Mara set the box on his workbench and opened the lid. His expression did not change, but he touched the machinist's square with one shortened finger. "He maintained everything," she said. Tools didn't argue. The gloves were inside. Leon closed the box. "You should have left them." "Why?" "Because they're no use to anybody. Neither is the quarry, according to everyone I've asked." "That's supposed to be clever?" "No. I burned out a pump this afternoon. I've been humbled." A corner of his mouth moved despite him. "You burned out a motor. The pump's probably fine. Is that cheaper?" "No." "Thank you." She took the insurance renewal from her coat and placed it on the bench. Leon's face hardened before he picked it up. "He kept paying this?" Mara said. "Why?" "Because the company caused the injury. Dean said there was an accident. Your father said a lot after it, most of it right." "What happened?" Leon folded the paper along its existing crease. A block shifted. "Guard wasn't where it should have been. Silas blamed the rigging, your father blamed Silas, and I blame the fact I had a hand under 2 tons of stone. Will you come look at the site?" "No." Mara nodded. She lifted her chin toward the toolbox. "Then, I hope your sockets are all there." She made it halfway across the garage before Leon called after her. "Saturday?" She turned. "I'll walk at once," he said. "I'm not restarting that company, and I'm not finishing Silas's life for him." "I didn't ask you to." "You were going to." "Probably." Leon studied her, then shook his head. 8 o'clock. "Wear boots you don't mind losing." "Why would I lose my boots?" "Because the lower bench has 18 feet of water over it. The road bed is soup, and you already have a proven habit of touching things after being told not to." He pulled his welding mask down. "And bring coffee," he said through it. "If it's flavored, I'm leaving." Mara bought the coffee at a gas station, where the label on the pot said "regular" in letters large enough to reassure Leon from a distance. She arrived at 7:43. He was already standing beside the quarry gate in a brown canvas coat, looking at his watch. "You said 8. "I said I'd be here at 8. "I didn't say you should arrive at 8. That distinction feels designed after the fact." "Coffee?" She handed him the cup. He drank, considered it, and nodded. "Acceptable. I'm putting that on my resume." Leon examined the green Ford. "Passenger floor still open?" "Mostly closed. Silas used to keep a road sign over the hole." "What happened to it?" "County asked for it back." He climbed into the passenger side and placed both feet carefully near the transmission hump. Mara drove down the ridge road. The morning was cold and clear after 3 days of rain. Water shone between the tire ruts. At the overlook, Leon tapped the dashboard. "Stop here." She parked. He got out and stood facing the quarry. For nearly a minute, he said nothing. Mara had expected anger, maybe some visible softening. Instead, Leon took out a small notebook and wrote down the water level against a limestone mark near the lower road. "Up 4 feet since I saw it last," he said. "When was that?" 12 years ago. "You haven't been back?" "No." You could tell the pump was dangerous over the phone. I knew Silas. They walked first to the control panel. Leon opened it, inspected the tripped breaker, and removed the mouse acorns with a screwdriver. "You were lucky." "I had an entire second to enjoy that." The motor winding shorted, could have started a fire in the conduit. Can it be repaired? Anything can be repaired if your standards are low and your wallet is open. My wallet is closed out of self-defense. He estimated $4,000 to $5,000 for a rebuilt motor, more if the pump shaft had seized. The portable pump might lower the upper water enough to inspect the intake, but it would not empty the lower bench. How much to empty it? Mara asked. Depends how fast the spring feeds, how much silt is down there, and whether the old discharge line has collapsed. So not $2,000. They continued along the service road. Leon pointed out the blocked drainage channel, loose fence, a section of unstable rock above the west bench, and 3 cedar trunks growing where trucks had once turned. The lease says I'm responsible for all of this. The lease was written when 32 people worked here. 32, 26 most years. 32 when orders were good. Mara looked at the empty yard. She had imagined Silas and Leon moving through it alone, 2 stubborn men surrounded by dust. It was difficult to picture voices, lunch pails, truck engines, arguments shouted over saws. What happened to everybody? They found work that kept existing. At the cutting shed, Leon paused beneath his blue hard hat. Dean still hung beside it. He looked away first. Your father wore that thing so loose it fell off every time he bent over. He was 23. He was vain at 23. He's vain now. He just has better balance. Leon made a low sound of agreement. He walked around the main saw without touching it. The machine seemed to make him wary in a way the flooded quarry had not. He checked the blade, guide rails, water lines, and electrical housing. Mainframe's solid, he said. Motor might be salvageable. Controls will need replacing. Belts are gone. Good gone or bad gone? What would good gone look like? I'm trying to remain open to surprise. The wire saw is newer. Newer than what? Electricity. He pulled the tarp from the smaller machine. Dust rose in a pale sheet. The wire saw stood on steel tracks, its control box sealed, its cables coiled on hooks. Tessa Ward ran this, Leon said. Best saw operator Silas ever had. Why did she leave? Same reason most talented people left. Silas made being needed feel like an insult. Do you have her number? Leon looked at Mara. You collecting people now? I'm collecting information. Tessa charges for hers. That seems healthy. He wrote a number in his notebook, tore out the page, and handed it to her. They went through the stockyard next. Leon identified the cut blocks by seam and grade, dismissing most with a glance. Fractured, weathered, too much calcite. That one might give you 2 decent slabs if the crack doesn't run through. Mara stopped beside the blocks she had admired from the ridge. Nolan said he'd pay $10,000 for the company. For everything? The lease and assets. Leon removed one glove and pressed his palm to a block. Equipment's worth scrap until it runs. Cut stock might be worth more than scrap to the right person, less to anybody who has to move it. Lease is worth what someone can do with it. That sounds like a way of avoiding a number. It's a way of avoiding lying. He led her behind the shed to a low shelf cut into the quarry wall. The exposed limestone looked darker there, blue-gray beneath streaks of rain. Leon chipped away a thin, weathered edge with his pocket hammer, then poured coffee over the fresh surface. Mara stared at him. You made me buy that. I drank enough. The stone deepened. Narrow, smoky bands appeared across it, tighter and more regular than in the sample she had found. Hollis Blue, Leon said. Grandpa named it after himself? Your grandfather would have named rain after himself if he thought it would sell. Leon moved along the wall, tapping it at intervals and listening. This seam is why the quarry lasted. Stone's hard enough for steps, fine enough for carving, and the color stays close from block to block. Courthouse downtown used it. Old Depot, half the church thresholds in the county. Then why did the quarry close? Cheap imported stone, cast concrete. Customers wanted fast and uniform. This looks uniform. To you. He pointed to 2 bands Mara had thought identical. One carried a faint green undertone. The other broke towards silver. Restoration people care, he said. Everybody else sees gray rock. Do restoration people buy enough to support a quarry? Not the quarry Silas wanted. What did he want? Everything running, full crew, trucks leaving daily. His name on the invoice. Leon stepped back from the wall. Aggregate company offered to lease the place. Blast the benches, crush it all for road base. Good money. Silas told them he'd rather fill it with rain. He seems to have followed through. Crushed stone would have destroyed the blue seam. Heavy blasting might have opened the spring and drained the farms north of here. Your grandfather was unreasonable about a lot of things. He wasn't wrong about that. Mara touched the exposed stone. It was colder than the air. Is this valuable? To a person who needs Hollis blue, yes. How do I find one? Customer files. I saw them. You read them? There are 6 cabinets. You inherited a company. Congratulations on the paperwork. They finished at the office. Leon reviewed the maintenance records, shaking his head at Silas's handwritten inspections. He wasn't doing these, Mara said. No. Who was? Could have paid Ernie Caldwell to check the fence. Could have driven to the overlook and filled the rest out from memory. He couldn't drive. That stopped him before? Mara thought of the green truck, its passenger floor covered by a county sign. Leon found a service receipt tucked behind the inspection sheets. A local handyman had cleared the upper drain and checked the fence in March. Silas had copied his findings onto the official form, adding monitored beside the pump. So, he wasn't completely pretending, Mara said. Silas preferred partially pretending. Harder to prove. Before leaving, Leon wrote a list on the back of an old invoice. Secure the electrical panel, clear the upper drainage channel, inspect the discharge line, test the portable pump, price insurance, locate equipment manuals. At the bottom, he wrote, "Do not start anything." You're enjoying that, Mara said, more than the coffee. At the house, Nolan's gray SUV was parked beside Dean's truck. Mara found her parents and Nolan at the walnut table with papers spread between them. Colleen had changed into a cream sweater she wore for dental appointments and serious purchases. Dean had a pen clipped to his shirt pocket. Nolan glanced at Mara's muddy boots. Productive morning? I burn nothing. That's a strong start. Dean turned a paper toward her. Nolan made his offer. The amount was less than Colleen had hoped for, and more than Mara had ever associated with her family. It would pay off her parents' remaining mortgage on their own house, replace Colleen's unreliable car, and leave enough for the retirement account Dean checked compulsively. Another line showed a deduction for quarry impact and restricted access. $25,000. If the company releases the lease, Nolan said, that deduction goes away. I'll also pay Mara $10,000 for the assets. $35,000 total difference, Colleen said. For you, Mara replied. For all of us. No, 25 for you, 10 for me. Dean's jaw tightened. No one's pretending otherwise. Nolan capped his pen. The land offer stands either way. I'm not making your sale contingent on Mara's decision. Just the price, Mara said. The price reflects what I'm buying. She could not argue with that. She disliked him more for making sense. How long do I have? I'd like an answer by Monday. Today is Saturday. You already know the condition of the company. No. I know one motor is dead, the main saw might not be, and somebody poured my coffee on a rock. Colleen closed her eyes briefly. Mara, I'm not signing by Monday. Dean leaned forward. What exactly do you think is going to happen? I don't know yet. That is not a plan. No, but it's more honest than pretending the lease means nothing, because reading it is inconvenient. His face reddened. Nolan gathered his papers. Take the week. Colleen looked at him. Your offer said Monday. My company offer did. He nodded toward Dean. The land offer remains open through Friday. After he left, silence held until the SUV disappeared beyond the sycamore. Dean removed the pen from his pocket. You cost us $25,000. I haven't cost you anything. You're holding a flooded hole. I'm holding a lease. Same difference. Mara went to the quarry office before she could say something built to last. She opened the black customer cabinet and began with the newest folder, though newest meant 14 years old. Most telephone numbers had been disconnected. One masonry company had closed. Another had been absorbed by a contractor 2 counties away. The 5th call reached a man named Wade Mercer. Hollis cut stone, he repeated. You people still exist? Legally. That's not what I asked. Mara looked through the office window at the drowned lower bench. We may be restarting limited production. The lie made her sit straighter. Wade was quiet. Then he said, You still have that blue smoky seam? I'm standing beside it. That stone's in the old Union Depot. Storm cracked 3 stair blocks last spring. We've been trying to match it for 6 months. Mara pulled Leon's list closer. How much do you need? Not much, if the match is right. But I need to see a fresh sample. When? Wade laughed. Yesterday. Mara looked at the sentence Silas had left her. Start with what remains. I can get you one, she said. Give me a week. Wade gave her an email address and the dimensions of the broken steps. Mara wrote everything on the back of Leon's warning list. Send pictures of the face wet and dry, Wade said. Fresh break, not something that's been sitting in a sample box since Clinton. I know what fresh means. Good, you'd be surprised. When he hung up, she called Leon. I found a customer. You found a man willing to look at a rock. He needs 3 stair blocks. You tell him you can supply them? I said I could supply a sample. That was almost responsible. How do I cut one? With equipment. The equipment doesn't work. That's going to complicate your new career. Mara turned in the desk chair, studying the stockyard through the window. Can I break a piece off one of the blocks? If you don't care whether it represents the seam, the cut, or the finished color, Wade specifically cares about all 3. Then call Tessa. Leon refused to call her himself. He claimed it was because he had already done his part by providing the number, but Mara heard something unfinished in his refusal. Tessa Ward answered with a brisk Ward fabrication, followed by silence when Mara introduced herself. Which Hollis? Tessa asked. Silas's granddaughter. I assumed he didn't have another grandfather. I inherited the company, so I heard. From Leon? Leon called to tell me not to let you put power to the wire saw. That advice has become a community project. Did you? No? Then it's working. Mara explained the depot sample. Tessa listened without interrupting, which felt more severe than Leon's sarcasm. When Mara finished, she asked, What are you paying? For the sample? For my time. I don't know yet. Call when you do. I can pay you $100 to come look. No, $150. You don't know what you need me to look at. I need a fresh sample cut from the Smoky Band, pictures for a restoration mason, and an honest answer about whether the 3 blocks he wants can be made with what's there. Tessa paused. 200, she said. 2 hours. After that, 75 an hour. The company can't afford many hours. Then ask good questions. She arrived Monday in an old white utility van with Ward fabrication painted on the side and a ladder strapped to the roof. Tessa was 53, broad-shouldered, with dark hair pulled through the back of a cap. She wore safety glasses before she left the van. Mara liked that, and immediately worried she had failed a test by not wearing hers. Tessa handed her a spare pair. You lose an eye, Leon will make it about him. He warned me about that. He warned me about you. They entered the cutting shed. Tessa walked directly to the wire saw, removed the tarp, and examined the tracks. She opened the control box, sniffed once, then closed it. That bad? That is what electrical damage smells like when it has had years to become subtle. Can it run? Not today. Eventually? Tessa crouched beside the drive wheel and scraped grease from a bearing housing with her thumbnail. You'll need cables, guides, new wire, controls checked, water circulation cleaned, rails leveled, and somebody licensed to tell you the wiring won't kill us. How much? I don't give prices while kneeling. She stood, wiped her thumb on a rag, and looked toward the tool board. Silas took my micrometer. Mara opened Leon's toolbox by mistake, then found a smaller wooden case in the cabinet beneath it. Inside lay a polished steel measuring tool with TW scratched near the hinge. Tessa took it without asking. Grandpa said everything in the office and she'd belonged to the company. He said my micrometer belonged to the company because I used it on company stone. I told him his boots were about to become company boots. What did he say? He deducted $32 from my check for insubordination. Mara waited for the joke. Tessa slipped the micrometer into her jacket pocket. He added it back the next week as equipment care. That sounds like him. No, it sounds funny now. It wasn't funny when he controlled whether I made rent. The rebuke landed cleanly. Mara looked down at the safety glasses in her hand and put them on. They went into the stockyard. Tessa inspected the blocks more slowly than Leon had, measuring, marking questionable areas with chalk, and recording numbers. She rejected the first 2 Mara chose. Too green. Leon said silver. Leon thinks every color he doesn't like is green. The 3rd block carried the correct smoky bands, but had a fracture running along one end. Tessa tapped it with a hammer, listening to the note change as she moved. We can take a sample here. Won't tell us if the center is sound. Can it make the steps? Not at those dimensions. Wade needs a minimum finished length of 64 inches. Crack leaves you 48. There are other blocks. Wrong bed height, wrong banding. Too weathered. Mara looked across the rows. So, we need new stone. We need a sample before we use the word we. Tessa opened the rear of her van and removed a portable masonry saw, a small water tank, and a generator. Mara helped drag the equipment across the yard. You came prepared, she said. I came to charge you $200. They marked a corner of the fractured block. Tessa showed Mara how to brace the saw, keep the water flow steady, and let the blade cut without forcing it. You're fighting it, Tessa said. I'm holding it. You're holding it like it owes you money. The blade squealed. Ease up. Mara eased. The vibration changed beneath her hands, smoothing into a lower hum. Blue-gray slurry ran down the block and collected in a shallow groove. Tessa completed the second cut herself. The sample came free with a tap of the hammer, a rectangular piece large enough to show the banding. Mara wiped it clean. Wet, it matched the Union Depot piece in Silas's sample box almost perfectly. Tessa did not praise it. She checked the edges, then nodded once. Send that. They photographed it in sunlight and shade, wet and dry, with a ruler along the face. Tessa corrected the angle of every picture Mara took. The man wants stone, not your thumb. My thumb proves scale. The ruler proves scale. Your thumb proves ownership of a thumb. Back in the office, Tessa reviewed Wade's dimensions and wrote a rough production sequence. Open the upper smoky band. Drill and split a block from the face. Move it to the yard. Square it with the wire saw. Finish the surfaces with the main blade, or hire that cut elsewhere. Each line required equipment, power, water, labor, or money. Can we do it by the end of the year? Mara asked. Tessa stopped writing. For 3 blocks, for commercial production. So, you read the lease. Everybody but my parents did. Tessa leaned back in Silas's chair. Mara nearly told her not to, then recognized the impulse as something inherited and kept quiet. You'll need insurance before anyone works, Tessa said. Electrical inspection, equipment inspection, drainage cleared, pumping plan. Then we find out if either saw is worth saving. How long? With money? Weeks? Without it? Forever. The company has 1,900 and some change. Tessa laughed. Mara did not. Oh, Tessa said. You're serious. I've been told it's a character problem. Sell the lease. The words were flat and practical. Nolan offered $10,000. Take it. You haven't seen the lease. I've seen the quarry. You also just found stone that matches the depot. I found a sample. You have an inquiry. Those are not a business. You and Leon use the same discouraging vocabulary. That's because we worked for the same man. Tessa closed the notebook and slid it toward Mara. Silas could make anything sound possible if the labor belonged to somebody else. Don't become him because you inherited his chair. She packed her saw and generator. Mara paid her $200 from the company account, wincing when she wrote the check. Before leaving, Tessa held up the micrometer. This comes off my bill. You already made me write the full amount. You're learning. Wade replied to the sample photos before dinner. Color looked right. Grain looked close. He wanted the physical piece shipped overnight and asked for a quote on the 3 replacement steps, unfinished, except for the top surface. If the sample matched on site, his client would consider the order. Mara printed the email at the public library because the Quarry printer produced 1 blank page and began smoking. At the farmhouse, Nolan's offer lay on the kitchen table with yellow tabs marking signature lines. Dean was in the garage. Colleen sat alone, drinking tea from Silas's mug. We're accepting it, she said. The lower amount, it is not low. It's $25,000 lower because of me, because of the lease. Same thing, according to Dad. Colleen traced the rim of the mug. Your father has worked since he was 16. He wants to retire before his knees make the decision for him. I'm not stopping him. You could sign the release. I could also find out whether the company can work. With $1,900, Mara wondered how quickly Dean had shared that number. Colleen pushed a second sheet toward her. It was Nolan's company purchase offer, $10,000, less any unpaid obligations discovered before closing. He'll hold it open until the land closes, she said. That gives you time, to agree with you, to make a decision. I did make one. I'm not selling this week. Colleen's mouth tightened. You always think delay is the same as independence, and you think urgency makes your decisions mine. Mara regretted it when her mother looked down. Colleen had spent years making urgent decisions. Which bill waited? Whether the car could survive another winter? How long Dean could keep working after the surgery on his left knee? Her practicality had not come from cruelty. It had simply sharpened until anything soft looked irresponsible. "We'll sign tomorrow," Colleen said. "Closing is in 12 days. Mara picked up Nolan's company offer. For one dangerous second, she pictured signing. $10,000 could buy a reliable car, 3 months of rent, and enough quiet to decide what kind of life she wanted without Silas directing it from the grave. Then she placed the offer back on the table. "I have a possible order." Colleen closed her eyes. Possible. That's the kind available before real. Wade called after the sample arrived. He had set it against the depot's damaged step and wet them both. "Colors as close as I've seen," he said. "Client wants a price." Mara sat at the quarry desk with Tessa's production list, Leon's warnings, and 3 equipment estimates she could not afford. "When do you need it?" 6 weeks would make me happy. 8 keeps me employed." "Deposit?" 20% after we approve your quote." Mara swallowed. "I'll have it tomorrow." She called Tessa. "I need a quote," Mara said. "You need a miracle. I can't put that on an invoice." Tessa sighed. "Bring Wade's dimensions to my shop." "Does that mean you'll help?" "It means I'll charge you for math." "And after the math?" "If the number doesn't embarrass both of us, we talk about the saw." Mara looked through the office window at the smoky band Leon had uncovered. For the first time, the flooded quarry did not seem dead. It seemed impatient. Tessa's shop occupied the back half of a former feed store and smelled of wet stone, hot metal, and the cinnamon gum she chewed without pause. Slabs of granite and marble stood in steel racks along one wall. A computer-controlled saw moved behind a yellow safety barrier, cutting an oval from a black countertop, while water sprayed across its blade. Mara watched through the barrier. "That machine looks functional." "That's why it's here," Tessa said. "Could we cut the depot steps on it?" "No, because the table is too small, the blade won't give Wade's surface, and Hollis limestone slurry would get into a system designed for polished stone. Also, I said no." She spread Wade's dimensions on a work table and began calculating. Block size, waste allowance, labor, blade wear, hauling, finishing. Mara tried to follow until Tessa added a contingency line large enough to buy a refrigerator. "What's that?" "The price of not knowing. Can we know?" "Knowing costs more." They settled on a quote of $12,400. Mara stared at the total. For 3 steps? For quarrying a block, squaring it, cutting it, finishing it, loading it, and delivering it without dropping it through a road. Will Wade pay that? He might not. Comforting. "You want me to make up a lower number?" "I want a number that gets the order. You want a number that finishes the order. Those are different." Tessa required $2,400 for her own work, half up front. Leon had not agreed to work at all. The portable pump needed servicing. The wire saw required at least $900 in parts before anyone could test it. Insurance would demand an initial payment. Mara adjusted the quote to require a 40% deposit. Wade called within an hour. $4,960 up front. "You did the math." "I'm a contractor. We use calculators to protect ourselves from optimism. I have to prepare the quarry. That sounds like preparation you'd need whether I hired you or not." He offered 20%. Mara looked at Tessa, who mouthed, 35. 35, Mara said. "The stone is custom. Once we cut it, I can't sell it to somebody building a patio." 25, 30. "Does that buy me a delivery date?" 8 weeks. Wade was silent long enough for her to hear someone running a saw on his end. "Send the revised quote," he said. When the signed order came back, Mara printed 2 copies. She pinned one above Silas's desk and carried the other to the farmhouse. Dean was packing books into liquor store boxes. He had written history on one, and everything from gardening manuals to a biography of Richard Nixon was going into it. "Those aren't all history," Mara said. "They happened before today. Strong system." She handed him the order. He put down a book and read it. His gaze paused on the total, then moved to the deposit. "That's real?" "A restoration contractor signed it. Can you do the work? I'm building suspense." Mara, Tessa Ward helped with the quote. Leon inspected the site. The stone matches. Dean read the first page again. He did not congratulate her, but he also did not laugh. "What do you need?" The question caught her unprepared. A pump, insurance, parts for the wire saw, an electrical inspection, Tessa's deposit. Probably 6 things I haven't found yet. How much? More than the customer deposit. How much more? 3 or 4,000 to start safely. Dean folded the quote along its existing crease. Nolan is still offering 10. I know. You could take his money and walk away with more than this job will pay after expenses. Yeah, I know. He returned the paper. Then what are you asking me for? I wasn't asking. Good. Mara took the order back. Dean picked up the Nixon biography and placed it in the box. I can't finance another fight with Dad. He's dead. Then you ought to stop making him the other person in every conversation. She nearly answered that Dean was the one doing it. Instead, she looked at the boxes accumulating along the wall. Are you keeping any of these? Your mother wants 2 boxes. Rest goes to the library sale, Grandpa wrote in them. Usually complaints about the author. That's still his writing. Dean pressed his palms to the box flaps. We can't preserve every mark he made. Mara thought of the lease, the company, the blue hard hat, the stone seam under the wet earth. No, she said. I guess we can't. The customer deposit cleared 2 days later. Mara paid the insurance premium and Tessa's advance. The remaining balance would cover the wire saw parts or a pump, not both. Leon knew of a masonry contractor selling a 4-inch portable pump with hoses for $1,600. It's ugly, he said over the phone. Runs. I already own ugly, not like this. The contractor would not hold it without cash. Mara listed the green Ford for sale that evening. Dean found the online advertisement before breakfast. You're selling Dad's truck? I need a pump. You need transportation. The truck needs a battery, tires, and a passenger floor that isn't public property. It runs. So does the pump. You haven't seen it. Leon has. Dean stood in the kitchen doorway wearing his store uniform, a red polo with Hollis Auto Parts embroidered over his heart. Nolan would give you $10,000 without making you sell the only useful thing Dad left. The company is useful. You've had it a week, and it has a customer. It has 1 order, which is 1 more than I had Monday. Colleen came in, tying the belt of her robe. Could we not argue about a truck before 7? Your daughter is selling an antique for a water pump. That truck is not an antique. It is a tetanus delivery system. It's worth more than she listed it for. Mara folded her arms. Then find me a better buyer. Dean left without taking his coffee. By noon, he had found one. A landscaper named Ricky Bell arrived after work, crawled beneath the Ford with a flashlight, and offered $2,200. Dean told him the transmission had been rebuilt 8 years earlier and produced the receipt from Silas's file cabinet. Ricky raised the offer to $2,600. Mara accepted. She removed the peppermints from the ashtray and Silas's work gloves from behind the seat. Dean stood with his hands in his pockets while Ricky counted cash against the hood. You could keep it, he said quietly. And do what with it? Drive. I need the pump. You could have asked me. You said you couldn't finance another fight with Grandpa. I could have bought a pump. Is that not financing? That's helping you avoid selling something you'll want back. Mara looked at him. Would you loan the money to Hollis Cutstone? His mouth tightened. I'd give it to you. That's the difference. He turned away as Ricky climbed into the Ford. The engine coughed, caught, and settled into its uneven idle. Mara had not expected the sight of someone else behind the wheel to hurt. It was only a truck, and not even a good one. Still, when Ricky drove down the lane, the empty place beneath the shed looked indecently clean. Dean went inside. He did not offer Mara a ride to buy the pump. Leon picked her up the following morning in a county utility truck, because the municipal garage owed him hours and, according to him, the truck needed a meaningful drive. The portable pump looked like an engine mounted inside a dented orange cage. 1 wheel was missing. A fern had grown through the pull handle. You called it ugly, Mara said. I didn't say picturesque. The contractor started it on the second pull. The engine roared, the fern trembled, and water shot from the test hose with enough force to knock over a plastic barrel. Mara paid $1,600. Leon helped load it into the utility truck. You sold the Ford? Yesterday. Silas know? I haven't told him. He'll find a way to be offended. They set the pump near the upper drainage basin and spent the afternoon clearing its intake. Mara hauled branches and mud, while Leon fitted hoses. The work left black sediment beneath her fingernails and a raw stripe across one palm. The pump began moving water just before sunset. It was not dramatic. The upper basin did not drain before their eyes. A thick stream simply traveled through the discharge hose and down the cleared channel, carrying a problem away a little at a time. Leon checked the flow, then looked toward the blue seam. Order still live? Deposit cleared. Tessa no? She's ordering parts. He nodded. Then you might want to call this operating activity. The lease says bona fide production. This isn't production. This is the expensive part before production. Mara watched the stream. I'm getting familiar with that part. Without the Ford, she depended on rides. Tessa collected her for the quarry twice, Leon once. On other days, Mara walked from the farmhouse, cutting across the hayfield, with her boots tied together over one shoulder when the ground was dry. Colleen offered her car only when she did not need it, then worried aloud about stone dust in the upholstery. Dean left the truck keys on the kitchen counter one morning without mentioning them. Mara used it, returned it with a full tank, and neither of them referred to the exchange. Nolan came to the quarry 3 days before the land closing. Survey ribbons had appeared along the ridge road, bright orange against the brush. You placed those? Mara asked. My survey crew. You don't own the land yet. I'm allowed due diligence under the purchase agreement. He crouched beside the running pump and inspected the water flowing into the drainage channel. You've been busy. I have an order, so I heard. From my parents? Small town. You live 2 counties over. Small industry. Mara waited. Nolan stood and wiped mud from his fingers with a handkerchief. My offer for the company expires at closing. You said there was no pressure. I said there was no pressure from me. Time creates its own. The lease continues after you buy. Yes. And the access road. Yes. And the cutting shed. I read it, Mara. Good. That saves us both surprises. He looked across the quarry. Do you know what this will cost you? Not yet. I do. No, you know what it costs your plan. His expression remained calm, but his attention sharpened. I'm not your enemy, he said. You're offering my parents less money because I exist. I'm offering them the value of what they can convey. And $10,000 for me to stop existing here. Nolan folded the handkerchief and returned it to his pocket. When you phrase it that way, I understand why 10 feels low. He left without increasing it. Mara walked home after dark, her boots rubbing both heels raw. The place beneath the equipment shed was still empty. Inside, boxes filled the living room, and Colleen had taken Silas's mug from beside the sink. The closing folder waited on the walnut table. Tomorrow, the land would belong to Nolan. Mara touched the original lease inside her coat, then went to pack the quarry office before anyone could decide. Its contents looked abandoned. She packed the customer files, insurance records, equipment manuals, and payroll ledgers into boxes marked Company. Anything clearly personal to Silas went into boxes marked House. By midnight, the distinction had begun to feel imaginary. The micrometer had belonged to Tessa, but sat in a company cabinet. Leon's toolbox had waited in a company shed for 12 years, while Silas claimed it was lost. Dean's hard hat still hung on a company hook. Even the office coffee maker had Hollis written beneath it in Silas's hand, as though another Hollis might break in and dispute ownership. Mara left the furniture, the stone samples, and the old calendar. The lease gave the company use of the office after the sale. Packing everything suggested she expected Nolan to disregard that. Taking the most important records suggested she expected the same thing. She slept for 3 hours, showered, and began wiping Silas's handwriting from the refrigerator because Colleen had said appliances conveyed with the house. The blood pressure numbers resisted the cleaner. So did the frowning face. Dean lowered his phone after Nolan's call. Mara waited beneath the one question neither parent had answered. What decision? Colleen set the blue closing folder on the kitchen counter. Whether you're accepting his company offer. No. Mara, Dean said. You can tell him no. He held it open as a courtesy. To himself. Dean looked toward the refrigerator. You missed a number. I'm considering leaving it. Nolan bought a clean refrigerator. Nolan bought Grandpa's blood pressure. Colleen pressed 2 fingers against her temple. I haven't had enough tea for symbolism. The closing had taken 43 minutes. Dean described it because silence made him restless. They had signed the deed, affidavits, tax forms, and disclosures. Nolan had signed through a company. The funds would take 1 business day to transfer. And the lease? Mara asked. Listed as an exception, Dean said. You read it this time? His face tightened. The title officer explained it. So Nolan now owns the land around the quarry, and Hollis Cutstone keeps the lease tracked and access. Yes, 17 years. I know how numbers work. Colleen picked up the cup she had brought Mara. The sale is done. We have 30 days in the house. No one has taken your quarry, except the part underneath it. The company never owned that. Mara stopped. Her mother was right, which did nothing to make hearing it easier. Dean took Nolan's card from his wallet and tore it in half. There. Offer declined. Mara looked at him. What? He said. You wanted an answer. You just cost yourself $25,000. No. According to you, I haven't cost myself anything. It was her own sentence, returned with interest. He dropped the torn card into the trash and went outside. Colleen removed Silas's frowning face from the refrigerator with 3 hard strokes. The new lock appeared at the main quarry gate that afternoon. A heavy chain passed through the old iron latch, secured by a brass padlock Mara had never seen. Nolan's survey flags continued down the ridge road beyond it. Mara called him. You changed the lock. The farmhouse gate is now part of a property under my insurance. The company uses that road. The lease includes 2 access routes. It includes the ridge road and the north route from County 12. I had that gate cleared this morning. Your key is in the quarry mailbox? You didn't tell me. I'm telling you now. After I walked 2 miles here carrying wire saw parts. I didn't know you were coming. You knew the company operated here. Then the company should establish a schedule. Mara looked through the gate. The cutting shed stood less than half a mile away. The north road hasn't been used in years. It's passable. For what? My surveyor's truck. Congratulations to your surveyor. Nolan waited out the sarcasm. The lease allows reasonable access, he said. It does not guarantee the route most convenient to you. It names this route. It also reserves the landowner's right to redirect traffic when an alternate route is provided. Mara had read that clause and hoped he had not. I'll inspect the north road, she said. Good. If it isn't suitable for stone trucks, this gate opens. If it isn't suitable, I'll improve it. He sounded reasonable. Again. Mara hung up and walked around the fence. The north route reached the quarry from the county highway through a tunnel of branches. Nolan had cleared brush from the entrance and filled the worst rut with coarse gravel. The road climbed more steeply than the ridge route, and one curve would be difficult for a long truck, but it was usable. A new mailbox stood by the gate. Inside was a key and an envelope addressed to Hollis Cutstone, LLC. Nolan had typed it. Tessa arrived 15 minutes later, took one look at Mara's face and said, He followed the lease, didn't he? Yes. Those are the most irritating people. They installed replacement guides on the wire saw, while Leon worked outside clearing the upper channel. Tessa and Leon spoke only when the machinery required it. Hand me the 3/4, Tessa said. Leon passed her the 11/16. She examined it. I see age hasn't improved you. I see ownership of your own shop hasn't improved your manners. My manners were never undercapitalized. Mara looked between them. Do you two need privacy? No, they said together. The electrician returned after lunch and approved the replacement disconnect he had installed. Tessa tested the saw motor without wire. It started with a high whine, then settled. Mara smiled. Tessa held up one finger. A spinning motor is not a functioning saw. It is more functioning than yesterday. That's how machinery seduces idiots. They loaded new diamond wire through the guides and ran it at low speed. Water sprayed along the empty cut line. The tracks held level. One guide bearing warmed more than Tessa liked. But after adjustment, the saw completed a short test through a weathered block. The cut face emerged smooth and blue-gray. Leon ran his fingertips over it. Not terrible, he said. Tessa shut off the water. You used to have standards. I still do. That's why I didn't say good. They had equipment capable of cutting. They did not yet have a block. The following morning, Leon marked a section of the exposed smoky band. He and Tessa argued over its length, then agreed on a larger raw piece to allow for hidden fractures and trimming. Mara drilled the first hole too shallow. The second wandered. By the 7th, she had learned to hold the drill steady and let its weight work. They inserted steel feathers and wedges into the row. Even pressure, Leon said. Quarter turn, move to the next. Mara worked down the line with a sledge. The ringing changed pitch as tension built through the stone. Tiny grains appeared along the intended break. Tessa leaned close, listening. Stop! All three stepped back. A soft crack moved across the bench. The stone separated along the drill line, with a sound quieter than a dinner plate breaking. Mara let out a laugh. Leon did not, but his face altered. For a moment, he seemed to be looking at a day from years earlier. They used hydraulic jacks, rollers, and a rented skid steer to move the raw block into the cutting shed. It took 5 hours, 2 bent pry bars, and every curse Leon claimed Silas had invented. At the wire saw, Tessa marked the first squaring cut. If they removed the weathered end, the remaining length would be enough for all 3 steps with a narrow allowance. Narrow, Mara asked. Enough if the stone stays sound and nobody gets ambitious. The wire began its slow path through the block. Tessa set the feed rate low. How long? Mara asked. 6 hours, maybe 7, for one cut? For the first cut. We have to make several. That is the nature of making rectangles. By late afternoon, the wire had traveled only halfway. Tessa left to finish a countertop installation. Leon went to the municipal garage for his evening shift. Do not change the feed, Tessa told Mara. I heard you. You hear everything. It's the gap between hearing and behavior that concerns me. Mara stayed alone in the shed, monitoring water flow and wire tension. The company order hung from a clipboard beside the controls. Wade had emailed that morning, asking whether delivery could move forward by a week. He had another crew scheduled at the depot and wanted to avoid a second mobilization. Mara had told him she would try. The saw's progress seemed almost insulting. The wire slid through the stone with a steady hiss while the feed gauge barely moved. At 6:30, Mara increased the feed 1 notch. The sound did not change. At 7, she increased it again. The machine continued cutting. Water ran clear enough. Wire tension stayed inside the marked range. Mara imagined Tessa returning and discovering that caution had wasted half a day. She increased it a 3rd time. The wire's pitch rose. Mara reached for the control, then stopped. It settled. A faint line appeared on the block's side, several inches beyond the cut. She wiped slurry away. The line vanished beneath her thumb. The saw shuddered. The crack ran through the block with a dry tearing sound. Mara hit the stop. The wire slowed. Water continued pouring over the stone. The raw block had split along a hidden calcite vein, dividing the usable length almost exactly in half. Tessa arrived while Mara was still measuring the pieces, as though the ruler might negotiate. She entered the shed, saw the feed setting, and switched off the water. How many times? Mara lowered the ruler. 3. Tessa walked around the broken block. She did not raise her voice. This was enough stone. I thought the rate was conservative. You didn't know enough to think that. We have more at the face. We have stone at the face. We had a usable block. I'm sorry. Tessa looked toward the old hard hats. That man never apologized until after the equipment broke either. I'm not Silas. No, he at least knew what he was doing when he ignored me. The words left Mara standing in wet slurry, with nothing useful to say. Tessa removed her safety glasses and wiped them on her shirt. I'm done for tonight. Are you coming back? I don't know. Tessa. She stopped at the shed door. I can't make the order without you. That's true, Tessa said. And if you use that fact to make my judgment less important than your panic, then I don't want the order. She walked out, leaving Mara beside the first thing the restarted quarry had made. 2 ruined pieces. Mara shut down the saw, drained the hoses, and swept slurry toward the floor channel until the overhead lights clicked off on their timer. Darkness filled the cutting shed. She stood still with both hands around the broom handle. Then she found the panel, switched the lights back on, and kept cleaning. The broken block could not make Wade's steps, but it was not completely useless. Tessa had marked 2 smaller sections suitable for thresholds or repair pieces. Mara wrote the measurements on each face before locking up. It was after 10 when she reached the farmhouse. Her socks had rubbed through the skin on both heels. She entered through the kitchen and found Dean sitting at the walnut table with a jar of peanut butter, a sleeve of crackers, and a box labeled bathroom. I don't want to know, Mara said. The bathroom box has towels in it, the peanut butter. We packed the plates. She lowered herself into a chair and pulled off one boot. Dean looked at her sock. You're bleeding. It's dramatic but shallow. What happened? Shoes. At the quarry, she peeled the sock from her heel. I ruined the first block. Dean stopped spreading peanut butter. Tessa told me not to increase the saw feed. I increased it. Why? I thought she was being too careful. Was she? No. He took a cracker from the sleeve and spread it for her. Mara accepted it. You can say it. Say what? That I don't know what I'm doing. You know that now. I knew it before. No. Before, you knew other people thought it. She ate the cracker. Dean got a clean dish towel from the bathroom box, wet one corner, and handed it to her. Dad cracked a lintel for the old courthouse doing the same thing, he said. Grandpa? He pushed the feed because the county inspector was coming. Leon told him not to. How much did that cost? Enough that we didn't get Christmas bonuses. Mara looked at him. You remember a lot for somebody who calls it a summer job. Dean screwed the lid onto the peanut butter. I remember the parts I paid for. He carried the jar upstairs, leaving her with the towel. Mara went to Ward Fabrication when it opened. Tessa was polishing the edge of a marble vanity. She saw Mara through the safety glass and continued working until the machine completed its pass. You here for the micrometer? She asked. No. Good. It's adjusted to me now. Mara placed the saw log on the work table. She had recorded the feed changes, time of the crack, water flow, and the dimensions of both remaining pieces. I marked the scrap for possible smaller orders, she said. I also added the wasted wire time and skid steer rental to the job cost. Tessa examined the log. Why? So I don't pretend the mistake was free. And I treated your instruction like it was an opinion I could improve by being nervous. Tessa crossed her arms. Mara resisted filling the silence. You did, Tessa said. I need your help to cut another block. If you come back, you control cutting. If I disagree, we stop and discuss it. I don't touch the feed unless you tell me. And if Wade calls, I tell him the truth. That'll be new for both contractors and customers. Is that a yes? It's an invoice. I'll take it. Tessa returned that afternoon. Leon said nothing when he saw her van, but he brought 3 coffees instead of 2. They opened a second section of the smoky band. This time, Mara followed the drill line exactly. They widened the raw block to allow for fractures and did not move it until Tessa had inspected every visible surface. At the wire saw, Mara stood beside the controls without touching them. You can breathe, Tessa said. I'm demonstrating restraint. You're demonstrating a medical event. The first squaring cut took 6 hours and 40 minutes. The stone stayed whole. They rotated the block and cut again. The dark bands ran cleanly through the exposed face, almost parallel. Tessa checked length and bed height twice before drawing 3-step profiles in chalk. Enough, she said. Leon touched the block with the side of his hand. Barely. Enough is a measurement. It's also a warning. Mara photographed the squared block and sent the image to Wade. His reply came before she left the shed. That looks like my stone. She read the message aloud. Tessa wiped chalk from her hands. He'll become less affectionate when he gets the invoice. Mara slept on the office floor that night rather than walk home. She used a folded moving blanket as a pillow and woke every time the pump changed pitch. Rain began before dawn. At first, it drummed pleasantly on the office roof. By 6, water sheeted down the windows. The quarry pool rose against the measurement marks, and runoff poured from the upper benches into the drainage channel Leon had cleared. The portable pump continued working. Mara checked its intake, refueled it, and congratulated herself too early. At 8:20, the office phone rang. She stared at it. The line had not received a call since she began coming back. Hollis cut stone. A woman said, "Is Silas there?" "No." "This is Mara Hollis, Silas's granddaughter?" "Yes." "This is June Harland. My south pasture is turning blue." Mara looked through the rain toward the north boundary. "What do you mean blue?" "I mean water. The color of wet cement is running through my fence." Mara grabbed her coat. The north drainage channel crossed beneath the access road through an old metal culvert, then fed into a settling basin near the property line. Water had overtopped the basin and cut a muddy path through its outer berm. Blue-gray runoff streamed across June Harland's pasture toward a stock pond. June stood under a red raincoat beside the fence, holding a shovel. She was a tall woman in her late 50s, with a long gray braid darkened by rain. 2 cattle watched from higher ground, with the concerned vacancy of witnesses who would be useless in court. Mara waded toward the broken berm. "Don't step there!" June shouted. Mara stopped just before the ground collapsed beneath the surface water. A section of earth slumped into the flow, where her boot would have landed. June reached through the fence and pulled her back by the sleeve. Thank you. Thank me by keeping quarry mud out of my pond. I'm trying. You're standing in it. Together they placed fence posts, feed sacks filled with gravel, and loose straw across the worst channel. The barrier slowed the water, but did not stop it. Mara called Leon. He was already at the municipal garage loading silt barriers into a county truck. How did you know? June called me first. She assumed you were dead or incompetent. Which did you tell her? I said I'd check. Tessa arrived with tarps. For 2 hours, they worked in rain that found every opening in Mara's clothes. Leon diverted the upper channel toward the quarry pool, while Tessa and June built a temporary barrier along the pasture fence. Nolan's SUV stopped on the access road near noon. He crossed the field in rubber boots and an actual waterproof coat, carrying a large black umbrella. Mara disliked him for possessing the correct equipment. He inspected the damaged berm without offering advice. Your survey crew drove across here, Mara said. 3 days ago, on the road. The culvert could have been damaged. It could have been. It wasn't. You know that? I had it inspected before closing. Of course you did. Nolan looked toward the blue water moving across June's grass. The lease makes sediment control the tenant's responsibility. I read it. It also requires you to notify the landowner of a material discharge. It happened 3 hours ago. And you notified Leon Pike. June did. Did you notify me? Mara wiped rain from her eyes. I'm notifying you now. No, you're explaining why you didn't. June planted her shovel in the mud. If you two plan to establish dominance, do it uphill. You're blocking my ditch. Nolan moved. By mid-afternoon, the flow slowed. The temporary barrier held, but the stock pond had a pale film along one edge. June walked its bank with Mara. My cattle drink here, she said. I'll have the water tested. You'll keep them supplied until it's clear. Yes, and you'll rebuild that basin properly. Yes. June looked at her. Do you know what properly is? Not yet. Silas did. Mara's stomach tightened. Then why is the berm broken? Because he stopped maintaining it. The answer was blunt enough to feel like mercy. I'm responsible now, Mara said. You are. I'm sorry. June studied her face, perhaps searching for the defense that usually followed those words. My well comes from the spring above this pasture, she said. When an aggregate outfit tried to buy Silas out, he sent them away because their blasting plan risked opening the water table. I respected him for that. So did everybody, apparently. No, everybody respected him after he died. While he was alive, half of us wanted to smother him with his own hat. Mara laughed despite the rain. June did not, though her eyes softened. Don't make me regret being glad the quarry isn't housing lots, she said. The emergency work consumed the next day. They rented water tanks for June's cattle, replaced saturated silt barriers, and hired an excavation operator to inspect the berm. His estimate for permanent repairs was $7,800, not including a redesigned spillway. The company account held less than half that. Wade's deposit was already committed to production. Mara sat in the office after everyone left, adding numbers that refused to become smaller. The phone rang. Nolan did not introduce himself. The lease allows written notice after a maintenance failure, he said. You would have 30 days to cure. Are you giving notice? Not yet. Mara gripped the receiver. What do you want? I want a stable property and predictable access. You want out of a problem you cannot afford. I didn't say that. You don't have to. Rainwater dripped from her coat onto the floor. My offer was based on an inactive company, Nolan continued. You have since restored equipment, obtained a customer, and demonstrated that the lease is not going to expire quietly. Is that your version of a compliment? It's my reason for revising the number. Mara said nothing. $60,000, he said, for the company's leasehold rights and assets. I assume the depot order and its liabilities. You walk away without debt. The office seemed to contract around her. $60,000 would cover rent, a car, and every bill she had been shifting from one month to another. It would return Wade's deposit, pay Tessa and Leon, repair June's pasture, and leave Mara with more money than Silas had ever trusted her to manage. Offer stays open for 48 hours, Nolan said. That sounds like pressure. This time, it is. He hung up. Mara placed the receiver in its cradle. Across the quarry yard, the second block waited inside the cutting shed. squared, sound, and wet from the storm. Beyond it, blue water pressed against a failed system Silas had left her to understand. Mara took Nolan's original purchase offer from the desk drawer. She set it beside a blank sheet of paper and began writing down what surrender would buy. The first column filled quickly: apartment deposit, used car, credit card balance, dental bill. 3 months without waking before dawn to check whether the company account had overdrawn. Enough money to stop treating every grocery store total as a personal accusation. The second column took longer. Wade's order, Tessa's trust, assuming any remained. Leon's return to a place he had sworn not to enter again. June's pond. The smoky band beneath the ridge. 17 years of access to land. Mara had once believed she knew without needing permission. She crossed out Grandpa's legacy after writing it. That phrase could justify anything. At 7, Tessa arrived to check the block and found Mara asleep with her cheek against the desk. "You drool on the offer?" Mara sat up. "I was thinking. Your thinking has a crease on its face." She handed Tessa the sheet with both columns. Tessa read the number at the top. 60. He'll take the depot contract and pay for the drainage repair. Get that in writing. You think I should sell? I think $60,000 is real money. Leon will say it's too low. Leon has a municipal pension and a truck with a floor. Mara took back the sheet. Would you sell? It isn't mine. That isn't an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Tessa walked to the cutting shed. Mara followed, irritated by the fact that no one wanted to become responsible for her decision. The squared block remained sound. Tessa measured the chalked profiles, checked for movement along the grain, and said they could resume cutting once the electrical system dried fully. If I sell, Nolan assumes the order, Mara said. Nolan knows stone fabrication. He knows how to hire people. So did Silas. Didn't make him one of them. Mara watched rainwater drip from the edge of the shed roof. I thought you wanted me to sell. I want you to stop asking other people to carry whichever choice scares you less. That's not what I'm doing. It's exactly what you're doing. If I tell you to sell, you can blame me when you regret it. If Leon tells you to keep it, you can blame him when you're broke. Tessa took a piece of chalk and redrew one of the cut lines. Make your decision. Then pay me to make stone or pay what you owe and let me leave. Leon was no more useful. 60's more than the equipment is worth today, he said when Mara called. What about the lease? Worth more to Nolan than it is to a person who doesn't own the surrounding land. How much more? Ask Nolan. I did. He said 60. Then there's your number. You told me not to sign anything. That was before you flooded June's pasture. I didn't flood it. The berm failed. You own the company responsible for the berm. Listen to how that sounds. Mara shut her eyes. You and Tessa rehearsed this? No. She uses longer words. Would you take the offer? Leon breathed out slowly. If I were 26, broke, and tired, maybe. If I were 62 and knew what that seam could do with the right orders, maybe not. Good thing I'm only one of those people. He hung up before she could ask which. Mara searched the property cabinet for the settling basin's original construction plan. She found surveys, water tests, and aerial photographs, but nothing showing the drainage system in detail. At the back of the lowest drawer, a cardboard tube had rolled behind the suspension rail. It was too long to pull forward. Mara removed the entire drawer, scraped both knuckles, and worked the tube loose. Inside were 6 sheets of graph paper taped edge to edge. The first showed the upper quarry benches and runoff channels. Blue pencil lines carried water through tube settling cells before reaching the pasture boundary. A wide stone spillway curved around the final berm, allowing overflow to spread across a reinforced bed instead of cutting through earth. The drawing was labeled Proposed Runoff and Settling Revision. At the bottom, in small handwriting, was D. Hollis. Mara knew Dean's printing. It appeared on birthday cards, grocery lists, and every box in the farmhouse where he formed his capital D like a triangle with a rounded back. Notes in another hand filled the margins. Too much pipe. Lose third cell. Use quarry, hours, spoil for spillway. Silas's handwriting. A later sheet showed a reduced 2-cell design. Several of Dean's ideas remained, including the broad overflow path and a removable screen before the culvert. The lease amendment used nearly identical language when describing the tenant's drainage obligations. Mara rolled the plans carefully and carried them to the farmhouse. Most of the living room furniture was gone. The walnut table had been moved against the wall, leaving 4 pale rectangles where its legs had protected the floor. Dean was filling nail holes. Colleen wrapped glassware in pages from an old farm magazine. Mara spread the drawings across the table. Dean's putty knife stopped. "Where did you get those?" "Quarry office." He wiped his hands on his jeans before touching the paper. His fingers moved over the proposed spillway without hesitation. "I forgot he kept these. They're yours." "Yes. You designed the drainage system. I drew a drainage system. Dad built half of one. The lease requires this version." Dean looked toward the kitchen, though there was nothing there now except boxes and the clean refrigerator. He used the language, nearly word for word. Dean laughed under his breath. It was not amusement. Colleen put down the glass she was wrapping. "When did you draw these?" "After Leon's accident." "That was about the saw," Mara said. "It was about the whole place." Dean leaned over the plans. Leon's block shifted because the floor around the rigging station stayed wet. Water and stone dust made slurry. Slurry got under the timber cribbing. Dad blamed a worn chain because a chain was easier to replace than the way he ran things. "Leon said you were right. I was loud. That isn't the same." To Dad, it was. Dean pointed to the upper channel. "I wanted this cut farther from the bench. Guards on the main blade. Dry storage for rigging. A second settling cell so nobody had to clear the first one during storms." He told me I had spent 3 years in community college learning to be afraid of work. Mara pictured Dean at 23, his blue hard hat slipping whenever he bent forward. Silas's insults sounded different when they landed on someone other than her. "Why did you leave the hat?" she asked. "I didn't." He took it off the hook and threw it after me. "It's hanging there now." Dean rolled the putty knife between his palms, then he put it back. Colleen touched his shoulder. He moved away, not sharply, but enough. Mara pointed to the spillway. "Will this work? If you build it correctly?" The excavation estimate is almost $8,000 for rebuilding what's there. This redirects overflow before it reaches the berm. Quarry spoil provides most of the rock. So it costs less? Probably. How much? Dean stared at her. "This isn't an auto parts counter. I can't price it from a drawing. Come look." "No." The refusal was immediate. "Why?" "I sold the land." "You sold the land around it." "The company still has. I know what the company has." "Then help me fix the system you designed." Dean folded his arms. "Take Nolan's offer. You think I should?" "I think he is offering you $60,000 to step away from Dad's last trap." "What if it isn't a trap?" "Then it's worse. It's an apology he arranged so he wouldn't have to say one." The room went quiet. Dean tapped the lease language Mara had copied beside his drawing. He knew these ideas were mine. He knew I was right. He kept the company alive, kept the drawings, put the requirements into the lease, and never once called me. He could barely talk this year. He had 13 years before that. You had 13 years too. Dean's face changed. Mara wished she could take the sentence back. She also believed it. "I was taking care of him," she said more quietly. "You were waiting for him to become the father who called first. Then he died, and you sold everything before I could understand what he left. It was ours to sell. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt me. You think it didn't hurt me? I think you used your hurt like it was the only one in the room." Dean stepped away from the table. Colleen said, "Enough." "No," Mara said. "He needs to hear it." "I have heard plenty," Dean replied. "You called me aimless while I spent a year keeping your father alive. Then you sold the place I was living and gave me 30 days like I was a tenant who forgot rent. We offered you our guest room. You offered me somewhere to fail more conveniently." Colleen flinched. Mara turned to her. "And you kept talking to Nolan about my company as if I couldn't be trusted to answer for myself. We were trying to protect you. From the only thing Grandpa trusted me to decide." Dean gripped the back of a chair. "Your grandfather did not trust people. He assigned them tests, then stopped giving me his." She rolled up the plans and left. At the quarry, June waited beside the damaged basin with water test results. The stock pond showed elevated sediment but no harmful contaminants. Her cattle could return to it once the cloudiness cleared. "I got an estimate on rebuilding," Mara said. "So did I. Nearly swallowed my teeth. I found a different design." She spread Dean's drawings across the hood of June's truck. June studied them, then traced the spillway. "Your father drew this?" "Apparently." "Silas should have built it. He built parts. Silas built parts of everything. That way no one could say he did nothing, and no one could say he finished. Mara explained Nolan's offer. June listened, then folded the water report. You sell? He'll repair the basin because his insurance will require it. Probably close the quarry afterward. I know. That might be sensible. Everybody keeps saying that. Does it offend you? It doesn't help. Help with what? Mara looked at the quarry pool. Knowing whether I want the quarry or just don't want my parents and Nolan to decide I can't handle it. June nodded. That is a better question. Do you know the answer? No. I'm a neighbor, not an oracle. Headlights appeared on the north road. Dean's truck stopped beside them. He got out wearing old work boots and carrying a measuring wheel, a level, and the same yellow notebook he had used to calculate the land taxes. I'm not financing this, he said. Mara stared at him. I'm looking, he added. Looking is not agreeing. June handed him the plans. Your spillway's 12 feet too narrow for the new rainfall numbers. Dean glanced at her. Hello, June. Hello, Dean. Your spillway's still too narrow. He spent 2 hours measuring slopes and elevations. He argued with June about the pasture grade, with Leon by phone about the culvert, and with Mara about where Silas had placed the second channel. By dark, he had revised the plan. They could use limestone spoil already piled near the yard, rent a compact excavator for one day, line the overflow with fabric and stone, and rebuild the settling cells in stages. The initial repair would cost under $4,000 if Mara and Leon supplied labor. Mara had $912 left from selling the Ford. The company could spare another $700 without jeopardizing the order. She arranged a payment schedule for the excavator and materials against Wade's final invoice. It used every available dollar. The next morning, Nolan delivered written notice of the maintenance failure. The company had 30 days to complete the cure. His $60,000 offer had 6 hours remaining. Mara signed the acknowledgement of notice. Then she turned over the page containing the buyout. Across the blank back, she wrote, Declined. Drainage repair underway. Inspection available upon completion. She signed beneath it and handed it back. Nolan read the sentence. You could have a car by dinner, he said. I could. Instead, you have a default notice and a spillway. He looked beyond her, where Dean and Leon were setting grade stakes from the revised drawing. Tessa stood in the cutting shed doorway, waiting to resume the depot block. Nolan folded the offer once. 30 days, he said. Mara put on her gloves. We won't need them. They did need 3 days. The rented excavator arrived with half a tank of fuel and a bucket that drifted left whenever Dean lifted it. Leon called that personality. Dean called the rental company twice and received instructions to wiggle a valve. You paid for equipment that needs wiggling? He asked Mara. I paid for 1 day. Then stop talking and wiggle, Leon said. They cut a shallow overflow path around the settling basin, widened it where June had demanded, and lined it with heavy fabric. Quarry spoil became useful for the first time in years. Leon sorted the larger pieces with the excavator, while Mara and Dean placed smaller stone by hand between them. Tessa continued cutting the depot block inside the shed. Each time the saw stopped, Mara left the spillway to check the controls and measurements. You trust me or you don't, Tessa said on the third interruption. I trust you. Then why are you dripping mud on my floor every 40 minutes? It's technically the company's floor. Tessa stared at her. Sorry, that sounded like him. Terrifying, isn't it? Mara returned outside. Dean worked from his revised drawing, checking the grade with a level so often that Leon threatened to bury it in the spillway. He had always been careful. Mara had mistaken careful for ordinary, because it was the part of him she knew best. The man who compared tire warranties, kept spare fuses in labeled envelopes, and tightened jar lids as if preparing them for air travel. At the quarry, his caution had once been treated as cowardice. By noon on the second day, his left knee began to stiffen. He hid the limp until June handed him a folding chair. I'm not sitting while everybody else works. Then hold it, she said. It will still support you emotionally. He sat. Mara brought him water. He drank half and started to pour the rest onto the ground. She raised an eyebrow. Dean looked at the bottle, then finished it. Neither mentioned Silas. Colleen arrived near sunset carrying sandwiches, dry socks, and a clean shirt for Dean. She stood at the edge of the quarry yard in shoes that had no business near mud. This is where you've all been, she said. Did the excavator fail to suggest that? Dean asked. I could see the excavator. I was expressing a feeling. She handed Mara a turkey sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Thank you, you're welcome. It was the safest conversation they had managed all week. Colleen watched Dean explain the spillway to June. Pride crossed her face, followed by something less comfortable. He drew that? She asked. Most of it. He told me Grandpa ignored every idea he had. Grandpa used them. He just didn't admit it. That may be worse. Mara bit into the sandwich. Colleen smoothed the front of her coat. Nolan called? Of course he did. He wanted to know whether you intended to cure the default. He could look out his window. He also asked whether I might persuade you to reconsider. Mara stopped chewing. What did you say? That you aren't persuadable. That isn't the same as telling him no. Colleen looked toward the cutting shed. He believes 60,000 is generous. He's welcome to keep it. Her mother opened her purse and removed a white envelope. There's something you should know. Mara did not take it. Before the land closing, Nolan had offered Colleen a separate $3,000 facilitation payment if Hollis Cut Stone released the lease within 30 days. He called it compensation for helping coordinate a clean transfer. Colleen had signed the side agreement without telling Dean or Mara. He said it was standard, she said. Is it? I don't know. Did you ask Ellen? No. Did you tell Dad? Colleen pressed the envelope against her stomach. Not yet. Mara laughed once. You kept arranging my answer after I gave it. We needed the money. You sold 173 acres. Most of those proceeds are already spoken for. So were my rights. I know how it looks. It looks like you got paid to convince me I couldn't do this. He hasn't paid it. The condition wasn't met. Then what's in the envelope? A cashier's check from me. Colleen held it out. $3,000. I'm returning the amount, she said. To Nolan? To you. I didn't lose $3,000. You lost the ability to believe I was only advising you. Mara looked at her mother. Colleen's eyes remained dry, which made the shame in them harder to dismiss. I thought the company was worthless, she said. Then I thought it was dangerous. I still think it may be dangerous. But I should have told you. Yes, I am telling you now. After the agreement failed, yes. Mara took the envelope. This doesn't fix it, I know. It doesn't buy forgiveness. I know that too. Mara put the check into her coat. It pays the excavation balance. That's what I'll use it for. Colleen nodded as though accepting terms. When she turned to leave, Dean was standing behind her. How much? He asked. Colleen closed her eyes. Their argument began in the Ford-sized empty space beneath the equipment shed and continued inside the farmhouse. Mara did not hear most of it. Dean returned to the quarry the next morning alone, carrying the grade stakes. Your mother went home, he said. To your house? That is generally what home means. The word caught between them. He adjusted one of the stakes. She told me what she did. Are you all right? No. Is she? No. Mara waited. Dean picked up the level. We have 6 hours left on this excavator. They finished the spillway before dark. A moderate rain tested it 2 nights later. Water filled the first settling cell, passed slowly into the second, and spread across the stone-lined overflow without cutting the berm. At June's fence, the runoff ran nearly clear. June filled a glass jar and held it toward the gray sky. That will do, she said. Nolan inspected the repair the following morning. He walked the basin with Dean's drawing, checked the culvert, and photographed the spillway. You widened it, he said. Current rainfall estimates, Mara replied. Your father's work? His design. Nolan looked toward Dean, who was cleaning mud from the level near the cutting shed. I assumed he wanted nothing to do with the quarry, so did he. Nolan signed the cure acknowledgement. The maintenance notice was closed. Mara folded the paper and put it inside the lease folder. Would have been simpler to take 60, he said. For you too. That's not always the same as better. No, Nolan said. It isn't. The depot block produced 3 full-step blanks and 1 smaller offcut. Tessa made the final wire cuts, then taught Mara to finish the top surfaces with the old main saw after its motor and guards passed inspection. Mara did not touch a setting without asking. Now you're being annoying in the other direction, Tessa said. I contain multitudes. You contain anxiety. Is the feed right? It was right when I said it. They cut each step slowly. Mara learned to read the water running from the blade. Clear meant the cut had not begun. Pale blue meant steady contact. A sudden white plume meant pressure or a change in grain. The first finished top surface emerged with the smoky band running through it like a brush stroke. Wade came to inspect before they cut the final dimensions. He was a compact man, with a beard the color of sawdust and a habit of touching stone before saying hello. He wet one depot fragment, then the new step, and placed them side by side. "Close," he said. Mara's heart dropped. Tessa said, "Close is what you ordered." Wade leaned lower. "New piece will weather darker." "Then it'll get closer," Mara said. He looked up at her and smiled. "Now you sound like a stone seller." He approved all three. His delivery truck could not negotiate the North Road's tight curve. A shorter flatbed could, but transferring the steps would add cost and risk. Nolan agreed to open the ridge gate for one scheduled loading day, then watched two trucks back across the field where he intended to build an entrance road. Survey stakes leaned beneath the tires. Stone dust drifted toward the future house sites. The saw ran for 9 hours. By afternoon, Nolan no longer looked irritated. He looked thoughtful. He asked Mara to meet him at the overlook after Wade left. "The ridge road cannot serve both uses," he said. "The lease says it can. Legally, yes. Practically, no. My buyers will not enjoy stone trucks passing their kitchens. Build kitchens somewhere else. That is one option." He unfolded a site plan. 5 large parcels covered the fields and woods. The quarry tract remained a blank shape in the center, crossed by access lines. "Another option is to separate the uses permanently," he said. "I sell you the leased premises." Mara looked at him. 41 acres, quarry, office, cutting shed, North Road, and a buffer. In return, you release access across the ridge and amend the lease out of the remaining land. With what money? Purchase contract, down payment, then monthly installments over 10 years. Title transfers when paid. "You think I couldn't maintain a lease 2 weeks ago?" "I thought you wouldn't. That isn't an answer. The quarry is worth more to you than to me, and less to you without control of the access. The surrounding land is worth more to me without the quarry attached. This is the first arrangement where both facts help us." Mara studied the plan. The proposed buffer was too narrow. The north curve remained outside the parcel. The settling basin crossed the boundary. "You drew this for yourself," she said. "Of course. So I'll draw one for me." Nolan almost smiled. "Bring it tomorrow." The down payment he proposed was $22,000. Mara had less than $300 in her personal account. Wade's final payment would clear the company's immediate bills and leave a modest profit, nowhere near $22,000. Tessa found the site plan on Silas's desk. "You thinking of buying?" "I'm thinking of laughing until Nolan leaves." Tessa studied the boundaries. He didn't include the lower spring line. "I know. Buffer needs another 100 feet along the west bench." "I know. North curve has to be yours, or he can squeeze truck access later." "I know." Tessa sat in Silas's chair. "What would 15% of the company buy?" Mara stared at her. "Not a gift," Tessa said. "An investment. My fabrication shop puts in cash, some equipment use, and customer contacts. I manage production. You keep control. You told me to sell. I told you 60,000 was real money, so is a quarry tract with title. Why 15? Because 20 felt greedy and 10 felt stupid." Mara looked at the finished depot steps lined beneath the crane. "You trust me that much?" "No," Tessa said. "That's why I want the contract to say I control cutting." Leon appeared in the doorway holding the final loading measurements. Whatever she offered, he said, "Ask for her generator too." Tessa did not turn. "Whatever he advises, remember, he works for coffee." Mara spread Nolan's site plan across the desk and drew a new boundary around the quarry, settling basin, north curve, and wooded buffer. For the first time, she was not trying to preserve what Silas had arranged. She was deciding what the company needed after him. Nolan moved the meeting from his office to the quarry after Mara told him she would not discuss boundaries while looking at a map of land he had drawn for himself. He arrived with a surveyor's print. Mara brought Tessa, Leon, Dean's drainage drawing, and a site plan covered in blue pencil. Nolan spread both plans across the hood of his SUV. "You added 9 acres, he said. "I added the settling basin, the north curve, the spring line, and enough buffer to keep someone's back porch away from the saw. The spring line isn't part of the leased premises. The quarry depends on it. You're purchasing the quarry, not a watershed. Then keep the spring and give the company permanent rights to maintain it." Nolan studied her boundary again. Tessa pointed to the west bench. Any house inside that line will complain about noise. Maybe not the first owner, the second one will. We can control operating hours. We already plan to, Mara said. 7 to 6 weekdays, 8 to 4 Saturday. No routine Sunday cutting. Leon grunted. Silas would haunt you over the Saturday start. Then we'll know where he is. Nolan traced the ridge road with his finger. You release this access completely? After the north curve is improved for loaded trucks and accepted by both parties. Accepted under what standard? A truck carrying 3 depot steps gets through without removing a mirror. That is not a standard. It's the first test. They argued over drainage maintenance, road gravel, fencing, tree buffers, and which party would repair the culvert if construction traffic damaged it. Nolan resisted giving Mara control of the full north curve until she offered to move the quarry mailbox and gate farther from the highway at company expense. Then they reached money. $22,000 down, Nolan said. Same as my proposal. No, you're asking for additional acreage. I'm releasing a road that crosses the center of your most valuable parcels. You were already willing to use the north route. Because you locked the other gate, the lease still gives me both. Mara placed a copy of the lease beside the plan. If I keep the ridge route for 17 years, you design around quarry traffic. If I release it, you gain clean access and 5 uninterrupted parcels. Credit part of that value against the down payment. Nolan looked at Leon. Did you teach her this? Leon sipped his coffee. I taught her not to start a pump. How did that go? Expensively. Nolan offered an $8,000 credit. Mara asked for 15. They settled at 12, leaving 10,000 due at signing. Monthly payments would begin 90 days later and continue for 10 years. The company would receive the quarry tract, office, cutting shed, settling system, north road, and a buffer wide enough to separate the saw from Nolan's future lots. Title would remain with Nolan until the contract was paid. One missed payment would not erase the agreement, but repeated default could. You'll want a lawyer to review this, Nolan said. I already called Ellen. His expression suggested that he had expected her to learn slower. Tessa invested $6,500 for 15% of Hollis Cutstone. Ward Fabrication also contributed use of its generator, portable saw, and customer list at stated rental rates, not favors to be remembered later. Tessa's agreement gave her authority over cutting operations and safety shutdowns. Mara retained control of contracts, land decisions, and company finances. Leon read the agreement at the quarry desk. You put safety shutdowns in writing? Yes. Tessa insist? I did. He looked at Mara for a moment, then signed a separate consulting agreement for hourly maintenance work. No coffee clause, he said. Coffee is provided at management's discretion. Company's already going downhill. Wade's final payment would cover the remaining $3,500 for the land contract, but only after the depot accepted the stone. Until then, the purchase existed as a signed term sheet and a deadline. They loaded the first finished step onto a short flatbed for the trip to the depot. The old gantry crane passed inspection, but nobody trusted it casually. Tessa operated the controls, Leon handled the rigging, Mara stood where she was told, and did not improve anybody's instructions. The step rose from its timber bed, 700 pounds of smoky blue stone hanging beneath steel straps. The crane rolled it across the yard. A breeze turned it a few degrees. Tagline, Leon said. Mara pulled gently, correcting the swing. The stone settled onto the flatbed without a chip. The second followed, then the third. Wade chained and patted all 3, checked the north curve, and drove out at walking speed. Mara rode with him because she did not have a car, and because trusting the stone to leave without her proved beyond her current ability. The Union Depot stood beside tracks that carried freight but no longer carried passengers. Its brick walls had been cleaned, and scaffolding surrounded the old entrance. 3 damaged limestone steps had been removed, leaving the doorway suspended above a shallow trench. Wade's crew unloaded the replacements using a small boom truck. The first step lowered into place. Its color looked too light beneath the open sky. Mara felt every dollar she had committed gather behind her ribs. Wade sprayed water across the old threshold and the new stone. The surfaces darkened together. The smoky bands did not align perfectly. Stone was not wallpaper, but they spoke the same language. He set a level across the top. Good, he said. Mara waited. Wade glanced at her. You need fireworks? Good from you has had several meanings. This one means send the invoice. The second and third steps seated cleanly. By late afternoon, workers were packing mortar beneath the final edges. People crossed them carrying tools before the stone had time to become ceremonial. Mara liked that. Silas had talked about buildings as though stone gave them dignity. The masons treated the steps as something meant to be walked on. Wade approved the final payment from his phone. "You get me consistent lead times," he said. "I have 2 church jobs and a courthouse landing that may need this color. How much stone?" "Not enough to make you rich." "Perfect. I don't have equipment for rich." He laughed and climbed into his truck. Mara stayed until the new steps dried to pale gray. She took the bus back to town, then walked the last mile to the quarry in darkness. Tessa had left the office light on. The payment cleared the next morning. Ellen Rusk arrived with the purchase contract, reading glasses, and a travel mug that smelled strongly of cinnamon. They signed at Silas's desk. Nolan signed first. Tessa signed the company investment documents. Mara signed last, her hand steady until she reached the legal description of the North Road. Ellen checked every page. "No gasps," she said, "although I will allow one modest exhale." Mara exhaled. Nolan slid the gate keys across the desk. "You understand that this is a purchase contract, not a gift," he said. "I'm aware of the monthly payment, and the maintenance obligations continue. I repaired the drainage. Once." Mara looked at him. "Do you practice making congratulations sound like threats?" "I practice avoiding misunderstandings." He stood and offered his hand. She shook it. "Your house lots need names," she said. "I recommend Quarry View. I'm planting trees." After everyone left, Mara walked the new boundary with a copy of the survey. She did not own Grandpa's farmhouse, hayfield, barn, or sycamore. Nolan's crews had already begun removing old fence along the proposed entrance road. The loss remained a loss. The company now controlled 48 acres under contract: the working quarry, the spring easement, the settling cells, the office, the sheds, and the road by which its stone could leave. It was not an empire. It was a place with payments. Mara moved out of the farmhouse before Nolan's 30-day deadline. Colleen offered the guest room again, this time without the nursing brochure or a suggested departure date. Mara stayed there for 9 uneasy nights, then rented a one-room apartment above a hardware store near the bus line. The first night, she ate soup from a saucepan because the apartment came with no bowls. No one told her the choice proved anything about her life. Dean helped carry the mattress upstairs. He looked at the sloped ceiling and the narrow windows. "You sure about this?" "No." He nodded. "Good answer." His relationship with Colleen remained strained after the hidden agreement with Nolan. They spoke, but with the careful politeness of people stepping around a hole. Colleen began seeing Ellen alone to untangle their remaining finances. She never asked Mara to return the $3,000 used for the drainage repair. Mara did not call it forgiveness. She called it restitution and recorded it in the company books. Orders arrived slowly. Wade sent the courthouse inquiry. A cemetery mason needed 2 replacement wall caps. A church wanted a threshold matched but postponed the work after seeing the price. Some weeks the saw ran 3 days. Some weeks it did not run at all. Tessa hired herself at the wage listed in her agreement and expected Mara to do the same. Leon submitted timesheets down to the quarter hour, except for coffee, which he continued pretending was free. Commercial production resumed well before December 31st. The invoices, shipping records, payroll, and completed depot order satisfied the lease requirement. Nolan acknowledged it in writing without ornament. On the last cutting day before Christmas, Dean arrived carrying his blue hard hat. Mara had noticed it missing from the hook, but assumed he had taken it during the move. He had cleaned it. The scratches remained, white across the crown. "Thought you threw this away," she said. "Thought about it." He turned the hat in his hands. "Dad put my drainage language in the lease," he said. Ellen confirmed the amendment was drafted 6 years after I left. Mara waited. He knew. Yes. Didn't say a word. No. Dean looked toward the cutting shed, where Tessa was measuring a courthouse block. "I spent half my life thinking I needed him to admit I was right. Would it have helped? At 23? Probably. And now? Now I'd ask why it took him so long." He set the hard hat on the desk. "I'm not asking for a job. I didn't offer one." "Good. You could help us install the removable screen at the upper culvert." He glanced at her. "The one from my drawing? The one from the lease." A smile appeared and vanished. "What time?" 7 tomorrow. That's early. You'll survive." Dean came at 6:40. Colleen arrived later with sandwiches. She asked before entering the cutting shed and wore the spare safety glasses Tessa handed her. She and Dean were still careful with each other. Mara did not arrange a reconciliation for them. She had learned that wanting people repaired was not the same as repairing them. The quarry's first larger shipment left in February, courthouse landing blocks cut from the upper smoky seam. Leon stood beside the north gate as the truck climbed the improved curve. Tessa recorded the load in the new ledger, writing her initials beneath Mara's. Dean stayed near the office outside the work crew, his blue hard hat tucked under one arm. He watched without claiming the drainage system, the lease, or the stone. After the truck disappeared, Mara went into the office. Silas's finest Hollis blue sample still sat on the shelf, its face polished until the smoky bands looked almost black. Beside it, Mara placed an offcut from the first block she had ruined. The broken edge was rough. A calcite vein split it down the center. The two pieces did not match. One showed what the stone could become when everything went right. The other showed the cost of forcing it before she understood the grain. Mara turned off the office light and left them together.